call this meeting of the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education to order. Mr. Gaynor, would you call the roll?
Mr. Coble. Here. Ms. Pepler.
Here.
Mr. Register.
You here?
Mr. Silverman.
Here.
Mr. Zucker.
Here.
Okay. I think we can move directly into personnel. Item B1. I'll take a motion to approve those items.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Coble. Yes. Ms. Pepler.
Yes.
Mr. Register.
Yes.
Mr. Silverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker.
Yes.
Item C1 is a resolution authorizing the guaranteed maximum price amendment between the board and the Gilbane relative to the Wiley School grounds. I'll accept a motion to approve that resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
We have nobody here to ask questions anyway, do we?
Yeah, they're here, they're just in the back, we'll get some, thank you.
We got a motion and a second on the floor.
Who's going to get the people?
Can-
Before we commit
Mr. Parliamentarian,
$2.5 million, I'd like
Can we table this for a minute until we get some people to answer some questions and move to the next item?
you need a motion? to table?
I think does a table have to have a motion?
No, here,
I think
here he is.
No, that's John Jansen.
No,
that's
there's
Patrick.
Pat.
Oh, hi. Oh, good evening.
Okay,
Before, I,
Eric,
we're supposed to, the GMP for Wiley. Would you like to comment?
Sure.
Before we commit $2.7 million?
I know, that's right.
Yes.
Anything you want to say?
What this is allowing Gilbane to finish up their work in terms of finalizing their contracts with their site contractors, finish their negotiations, and allow us that as soon as we have the final approvals from City Council and for our building permits, that they can move into construction. This doesn't allow us to move into construction, but if you recall, when we approved the GMP for the stadium back in, I think that was probably end of March, it was still a month and a half till construction started. It shouldn't be a month and a half, but the GMP process is one where, again, we ask Gilbane to provide certainty on costs. These costs are within our budget, and this allows them, again, to do what they need to do so that, again, as we do have the final approvals, that is a seamless transition into the construction process.
So this is the construction inside of Wiley, correct?
No, this is site work. This is
Site work,
okay.
demolishing the wall, the retaining wall where the bus cruisers park now, is putting in the roadways, it's putting all the utilities in that'll serve the modulars. It's doing the work outside of the property.
So we've purchased the modulars.
Correct.
This is a site work out externally. When is the next GMP or next contract like this? When should we anticipate for the work on the interior of the structure?
December 16th, the
Okay.
December 16th board meeting. We will they're working now to assemble bid packages for the work that has to happen in the building. And when we buy the modulars, for example, they don't have the fire alarms in them.
Right.
They come mostly done, but not 100% done. So we haven't, that'll be a separate package. For example, all the corridors that will connect
Right.
Wiley to the modulars, that'll be a separate package. That will be December 16th.
When should we and the public expect to see, theoretically, we start seeing green lights across the board? When should we anticipate we'll see construction on the Wiley site?
When we get the building permit approval
Well, I
from,
mean, theoretically, if we get green lights, everything is rosy, when should we anticipate?
before Christmas. Before
Okay.
Christmas, we should
Gotcha.
be moving dirt.
Okay. And have the delays in the process, have we seen any have we incurred any, is there any expense? Or are we okay because of we're not hurting because of the delays, are we?
Well, our assumption had been that we would have originally the schedule assumed we'd have a building permit by now to start the site work. So we'll be 2, 3, 4 weeks behind that.
Okay.
It really will be dependent, Eric, on the weather.
Okay.
If the weather is like the weather has been the last 3 or 4 days, we would have been in trouble regardless. If it goes back to normal weather, the feedback we've gotten from the folks at Gilbane is you know, we have some contingencies that should be able to handle normal weather conditions, and we should still be fine for when the modulars are going to be showing up out on site at the end of January.
Okay, so they'll be able to have the,
Foundations will be in, the roadways will be in, yes.
okay, so they'll be able to do all the concrete work and all that.
Correct. Yeah, concrete work you can do, you know, in the winter.
I know they can, I'm always like, but, okay. But theoretically, we should be able to, the time that we've lost, we should be able to pick up during the construction phase so that
At this just juncture, I would
Well,
say
yeah.
that the risks that we still face are certainly manageable within the constraints and confines of what we've planned for and what we have budgeted.
Gotcha, okay.
You say this is within budget. Can you talk a little bit about the GMP relative to budget?
Which portion, Ron?
Well,
For the site work.
The site work, you say is within budget.
Correct.
So you have a budget for the site work. I'm asking what the relationship is between the GMP and the budget that you were referencing.
Sure. In the whole budget for all of the enabling projects, we had allocated approximately $9.1 million for the modulars, which includes the buildings, fitting out the buildings, and the site work associated with that. Within that approximately $9 million, we estimated about $4 million, $40 a square foot, roughly around 111,000 square foot of building, about $4 million for site work. So in that perspective, this portion would be putting us in a good position budget-wise. Now, overall, we have some other issues with respect to some utility costs that we think will probably eat up some of that cost. But as far as the site work portion is concerned, this would be under what we would have anticipated in how we generated the total budget for the enabling projects.
But for the site work itself, it's just a hair above what you thought it initially.
No, we anticipated $4 million, and this is 2.4, and that includes the staffing costs associated with the site
Okay.
work as well as all the work in the building.
Okay.
Is part of that because of the widening of Miramar, or is that a whole separate issue unto itself?
That's a separate issue, separate
Oh,
issue.
so we're looking, right now, we're looking good right now, we still gotta see, there's still some potential for cost creep in some other components.
We have be able to enhance our contingency pool of money based on the dollar values associated with what we're asking to award compared to what the budget was.
When in 2015, when we've got much more downfield, when should we anticipate knowing real solid as far as what the?
By the end of January.
Oh, really? Okay.
End of January,
Good,
we'll
good.
know. I mean, the foundations will be in, the modulars start showing up, we'll know. Again, we know the field, where the football field was, had a thick layer of topsoil. We know that the soil's not particularly great for foundations, but based on our design, again, we're pretty comfortable with what our budget is. The unknown is you drill a bunch of holes, you haven't
Right.
done all of it.
But by January, we should have a real good sense of.
Oh, yeah, end of January, we will know very
Okay.
clearly, where we stand.
Gotcha.
Sure.
And it's, at that time, I would say at end of January, early February, we could make decisions of moving dollars.
That's,
Yeah, I think that's where you're going.
you know where I'm always going
Yes,
with that.
okay.
So it's a
And-
big shell game.
And I will say this, though, we're very pleased at that GMP number being significantly lower than what we anticipated. But as Pat said, there are two things that we have to get through. There may be costs at this GMP, we have to take the risk of bad weather.
Right.
All right? And we also have to take the risk of bad soils. And as Pat explained, by the end of January, we'll know what those two risks should be mitigated at that point in time. We'll know if we had to spend more money because of bad weather or if we had to spend more money because of bad soils.
The furniture, I know only because it was in the slide, and then I think I was leaving. The furniture that's going to be in the modular units, is that new furniture, or is that repurposed from the high school?
No, we anticipate repurposing the high school.
Good, okay.
One of the, last week, Mr. Zanoni and some of his cohorts made a presentation in Columbus relative to our master facilities plan and how we got there and blah, blah, blah. one of the comments that was made is that as a Board of Education and generally as public bodies, we don't have expertise, which is why we hire owner's rep. One of the pieces that keeps coming up, and we have to, as a board, try to reconcile, we hear a number and we got another number in our mind, and then we end up reconciling those numbers. One of the things I know is we got a CMR contract for $11 million, or a little more than 11 million. And you just mentioned 9 million, and I'm trying to reconcile what I heard and what we are doing with the contract. And those, I know there must be a logic in it, but I'm not tracking it as well as, I can't match those numbers, let me say it that way.
Different pools of money, Ron. We have a CMR working on the high school that has a contract. We have a CMR working on the enabling project, different pool of money, different set of contracts. So,
Yeah, and I guess the contract, the 11.6 was the contract for the GMP at Wiley, I believe.
Well,
no.
Right. Well, also, we have, I think, we use the phrase enabling projects, but we have to remember, we have the enabling project would be the movement of the bus depot, the work at Wiley and Monticello, even the auditorium seats. There's a number of components that we may not view as Wiley construction.
Yeah, but I don't want to minimize our challenge. When we see a line item that says clothing, we think that that clothing suit that we're going to buy is going to come out of clothing, not somewhere else in that budget. So all I'm saying is that I want to be able to line up what we have. If we're talking about, okay, let me just say it this way. I'm sitting here getting ready to sign a budget contract for $11.648 million, which says, it says on here that this is the Wiley CMR contract. And then I hear you standing there saying something about we were still within this $9 million budget, and I'm saying, wait a minute, how, I wasn't able to, I'm slow, I guess.
No.
Yeah, because I was not able to reconcile those numbers. That's good. You know.
I understand what you're saying now, Ron. It goes back, when I said that there's about $9.15 million for the modulars at Wiley, that is one of the components that our CMR will be managing for us. There's another budget of $2 million of work inside the building at Wiley. So there are, and as Eric mentioned, there are a couple other small projects that are included that we're going to have the CMR manage for us. So that's how you get to the value that's on the CMR contract that you have in front of you. So there are other elements that will be coming to.
And I guess when we take these things and we do pieces of it, I think we have to think about it in terms of just as we would think about that budget and where the clothing is coming from. We need, you guys have an idea, and we hire you guys to make us have an idea, and that we can at least track what we're doing rather than, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I mean, that's a sufficient explanation for me, but sitting here, I wasn't able to reconcile these numbers. So, and I'll always be wanting to try to reconcile those numbers.
Sure.
So almost anytime we have something like this before us, I would ask to try to run down, run through, take a couple of minutes, run through, and this is where this is where that is, and this is how it all fits together. It'll be helpful to me.
Sure.
Okay?
Definitely.
Anything else? Yeah.
Just a couple things. One, in terms of weather, I just came from Erie, Pennsylvania. We're not having any weather here. So number two is just things for the greater audience to hear. Tonight, what we're voting on is simply the GMP for the Wiley, for this portion of the site prep of the Wiley project, period. Nothing
Correct.
to do with the high school.
Nothing to do with the
Just
high
being
school.
very clear. The other thing I think I heard you say, because I can't remember what number I'm on, the other thing I think I heard you say was that when we vote tonight, that does not allow us to start construction.
That's
So
correct.
could you just be very clear for the
That is
audience?
correct.
What does it take for us to be able to start construction?
Well, we need city council approval, and we need the building department approval of our plans and specifications that we have submitted. So we need a actual permit for construction from the city, which also requires us to go to city council, the city council meeting in the first week in December.
Right, so being very clear, we're not in any way preempting the University
We're
and
not.
City Council, we're simply just
No,
acting
and then
on-
the CMR understands that, and that is part of the process. Again, as we did with the stadium project, they guarantee us a number, then they finalize their contracts with the people on their end. You know, but no, we cannot start construction based on this vote. There are other political entities obviously involved in permits that we have not received yet.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Gainer, would you call the roll?
Ms. Pepler.
Yes.
Mr. Register.
Yes.
Mr. Silverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker.
Yes.
Mr. Koval.
Okay. Thank you. That moves us to item D, finance. I can take D1 and a motion for D1 and 2 together.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved in second. Any questions, comments?
I'll just mention number 2, we're asking for this because congratulations to the library, but their levy is now on this tax rate resolution. So once they were successful with that, then our board has to pass a new tax rate resolution on their behalf.
Because we're the fiduciary agent for that.
Absolutely, correct.
Nancy didn't come?
I'm sorry?
Nancy Levin didn't. Sorry, no. Didn't mean to confuse.
What did you say?
I said Nancy Levin didn't show up, I'm surprised.
Oh, okay.
She's in here.
It's now legit.
She's here in spirit.
Anything else? Mr. Gainer, would you call the roll?
Mr. Register.
Yes.
Mr. Silverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker.
Yes.
Mr. Koval.
Yes.
Ms. Pepler.
Yes.
We now have a superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, we're going to talk about some fun items and really get into the instructional part of a district. And we're going to talk about the Ohio improvement process and also our district report card. So we have our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Dr. Andres Selico, and our Director of Data and Assessment, Allison Bird, here this evening to give us a presentation on the Ohio improvement process and why we're doing this process. And secondly, our current report card and some upcoming changes and what our report card means. So I give it to the ladies to go ahead and get started. Start with you, Dr. Selico.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dixon. Good evening, board. We're excited tonight to be able to talk about teaching and learning. As intriguing as brick and mortar is every month that we listen to. We enjoy all those conversations, but we're excited to have an opportunity to give you some updates, provide you with some information regarding the Ohio improvement process and the progress we've made. So I've provided you with 2 documents. The one is a draft of our plan that's been updated. That's this first one, and it starts with the gray. I know there's green on the back. That's the actual back side. So the front side is the gray. And then a copy of the PowerPoint. There's one slide that's been updated, so I will email you this presentation when I'm done, and I'll point out the slide that's been updated when we get to it. So as Dr. Dixon stated, we're going to talk a little bit about, I don't want to belabor what we've done and just give you just a brief history of where we've come from and where we're headed. So as you recall, we've established, just talking about what we did in 13-14, I just want to remind everyone that again, in 12-13, there was some work that had been accomplished and it was great work, but our true first year of implementation was really last year, and even just getting traction in the first couple of months of school was, still getting our feet wet, and so we really began to see some improvements and some work really getting done the second half of the year. So I just want to remind everyone, this is really our, we're just getting our feet wet, and there's a lot of steps and a lot involved in this process. So thus far, some of the work that we've done is we've, again, established our district leadership. I know there's lots of acronyms, so I'll try to spell them out for you. So the district leadership team, there's building leadership teams, and there's teacher-based teams, as a reminder. So the district steering team meets, and so does the district leadership team meets monthly, as well as the building leadership teams, and then teacher-based teams meet weekly. So we were able to establish a clear line of communication and feedback and functioning teams that have been working very well together. In addition, we've conducted a needs assessment based on the district data. So if you recall, we went through the process of sort of examining our data, and then from that, as a result of the analysis of district data, we were able to create goals, strategies, and action steps, and those are indicated in your plan that you have before you. And so we created those goals in reading, math, and climate, and we'll review those as well. But we were also able to create, which I think is the bulk of our work, are these subcommittees, which are comprised of administrators and teachers. And so this is really where the rubber hits the road in getting work done. And so a number of things were accomplished last year by these groups of people, in which we were able to complete curriculum maps, so mapping out our curriculum, what we're gonna be teaching when, otherwise known as pacing guides. We were able to create common formative assessments, which are short assessments that are given to students to measure their growth, and then to, in turn, use that to design our instruction. And that's all the work that's happening at the teacher-based teams. We organized a math pilot for secondary educators, in which we are piloting 2 programs at the middle and high school, and we will be doing an analysis at the end of the year to see which program we will be selecting for secondary math. We also created an organized system for analyzing data. So we have very clear forms that took a lot of work, but it creates a framework in which people are able to take their data, look at it, examine it, create strategies, and so it's a 5-step process that's really come together at all levels, at the teacher level, building level, and then again at the district level. We also were able to develop a master schedule to address collaboration time. So teacher-based teams are a very important, very critical element that leads to success for our students. So if we don't afford teachers the time to actually sit and concentrate on student work, it's hard to just do piecemeal or try to throw together. So we've established a very effective schedule. In the feedback we're getting, we changed at elementary. We were able to do it first thing in the morning. And the teachers get almost 1 hour to sit with their colleagues once a week. So a kindergarten team meets, a first grade team, et cetera, and they're able to really dedicate the time to this process, to look at student work, to analyze the data, to design instruction, to follow up. So we're excited about that. And middle school has built-in time during the day, which is great, as well as the high school uses some of their early release time. So all levels have been able to establish some great time dedicated to this process. We also conducted our first Tiger Youth Summit, which came out of our climate goal. And so we had students selected by the principals to some outstanding students that were able to go to John Carroll for the day, and that was facilitated by district administrators and counselors, and as a result came up with some great ideas on how to introduce some positive climate activities to reinforce Tiger expectations. And so you have these building capacity for leaders within the buildings to encourage, safe and secure schools. And we also created, again, the process for effective feedback, whereas, again, referring to those forms, we prior to this meeting, we had a district leadership team meeting, and we have a system where the district level is monitoring what the building level teams are doing, and then the building level teams are monitoring what the teacher teams are doing. And we have a form of communication, which we're very excited about. We just moved to Google Classroom, in which we'll be putting those forms on, so we can get away from all the stacks of paper that we've been distributing to people. So we'll have a nice, efficient process. The results will be immediate, so people can get their feedback immediately, which has been very exciting.
In this context, what does climate refer to?
Climate addresses a number of things. It addresses student behavior. You'll see a goal around reducing the number of suspensions. Also with the community and stakeholders, we have an action step around that.
So more like general atmosphere as opposed to,
Yep.
because I know what reading and math are, I wasn't sure what
Yeah.
climate, okay, I got you,
Yes.
okay.
So just to review our goals, our reading and math goal, and again you have it in front of us, which is around that increasing our performance index by 1.76%, points each year to obtain a B by 2019, which has been our goal, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Our climate goals were about the 10% reduction in the number of students receiving, the percentage of students, number of students receiving an office discipline referral, which is different than measuring suspensions. It's looking at the number of actual students getting referrals. So we wanted to see a 10% reduction there. And then our third goal was a minimum of 75% stakeholders indicating satisfaction with our climate and our safety and security. But the reason that's struck out is because this is a process that evolves, and so it's a fluid document in which this document gets revised just about weekly, because we're trying to be effective in what we're doing. And so what we ended up doing was striking this goal and folding it into action steps. So we're not ignoring it. We're going to build stakeholders and satisfaction and climate survey type things into an action step. Later you'll see it reflected in your document. But as a result, we felt that there was something more pressing in our climate that needed to be addressed. And that is our new climate goal, which is the district will achieve a 6.2% reduction in suspensions for African American students from 2013-14 to 14-15. One of the things that we've noticed, and I want to point out, I know, Mr. Zucker, you've addressed many times about wanting to see a connection between all the different initiatives that we're doing. So this is directly related to the work of MSAN, and Ms. Bird is very active in that, as well as Dr. Ford has come to our district, you've heard her mention before, looking at the disproportionality of our students and the number of suspensions that are happening, especially among our male African-American students. And so we need to address that. We've agreed as a district leadership team that that's something that's important, that needs to happen. And so that has become one of our goals. And the strategy to align with that is to address the discipline disproportionality through the transparent display of data and implementation of strategies that will reduce the amount that students are being removed from the classroom. Because we have to keep in mind, every time a child is suspended from school, they're missing out on instruction. Sure, we can send work home, but we all know how that works, even as adults. If I miss instruction, I need to see that face to face. So we're trying to address that. And so some of the action steps that we have is we're going to be very deliberate in our measuring our progress. And every 6 weeks, we'll be analyzing the data and the number of suspensions. Principals will be provided with that information that they can look at to see where they are in line with meeting the district goal, as well as then implementing interventions. And again, tying that work to MSAN and Dr. Ford's work, and what are some interventions that we can do specifically to address this problem that we're experiencing.
Where did the 6.2%, how did we come to that? Why not?
It's a good question. This was,
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the Dr. Ford's work, the recommendations for a calculation, Ms. Bird can address that specifically. This is for bailiwick.
So the percent reduction came from what Dr. Ford refers to as the equity allowance formula. So given our population, the percentage of African-American students that are suspended over the course of a year far exceeds what should be given the total number of students enrolled.
Okay.
So based on the formula, if we have a 6.2% reduction, we will be more in line with what is proportional given our population.
Why I visited Dr. Ford's website and saw some of her materials. Why is how did Dr. Ford come up with her formula, and why is she why is it her formula versus somebody else's?
So there's a few different reasons why we have gone to her formula. One is that we became familiar with her work because she's nationally recognized in the area of giftedness, in particular looking at gifted African-American students or students who are typically underrepresented in gifted or special education populations. In addition to that, she was a key witness in a federal case where a school district was sued by one of their families, and the judge actually highlighted her work and her formula based on the years of research that she's done, and it was that formula that actually, one of the key reasons that the judge found in favor of the family and told the district that their practices were inappropriate. So those are the two biggies.
Well, because I remember I researched the case that she was cited as the reason why Dr. Ford is, I guess, but there was no explanation as to how she came to the math behind her magic number. I guess I think her variance is 20. She has a 20% variation.
Correct.
So, but the question I would pose is, why is it 20% versus 15% or 25%? There was no explanation as to the rationale behind how she came up with her formula. So that was what I was trying to figure out. Why is her formula the formula that is the gold standard, as it were? Because there's no, it's why not 18%? Why not 22%?
Rather than mess up her research, the formula is quoted in 2 of her published books. And so what I can do for you when we conclude, I can pull the specific research that she's pulled to identify that 20%.
That was one of the things in the MSN report. I was trying to figure out, okay, why is there's other folks who obviously have opinions. Why is Dr. Ford's the only one that we're using? Now, the question I would pose also in regard to this would be, if we don't see a reduction, I guess, how are we going to see a reduction? What methodologies are we utilizing to see the reduction? I do see the data now.
Can we go back to your other question? Because I just want to make sure I understand. You're asking why are we setting a goal of 6.2? And what I heard was that the 6.2% reduction would bring us in line with our overall demographics and population.
Correct.
Within the Dr. Ford's formula, though. I think we'd still be we'd still be disproportionate, correct?
It,
Say that again, Aaron.
Well, right,
No,
if I'm understanding.
No,
the-
I want to hear the answer to that. I think that's a good
That's-
qualification. 6.2 would, my understanding of what I heard you say is that 6.2% reduction would bring us in line with our population differences.
No, it brings you into with Dr. Ford's number.
but it does bring us more in line with our actual population.
More
So-
in line.
Correct.
Based on, okay.
So one of the pieces that we looked at, African-American students make up district-wide 74% of the overall population, yet they represent 94% of
Right.
the percentage of students suspended. So the reduction actually makes it,
The 6.2 would get us to the 20% of Dr. Ford's formula, but not a true representation of our demographic breakdown.
Right.
We'd still be out of compliance by 20%, but we'd be matching Dr. Ford's formula.
well, there's always some give and take. It isn't an allowance.
Right,
So you
right,
have
right,
it some
right, right,
slightly above or slightly below.
Right, right.
I think the issues that are raised are important. I think that what we're not saying yet is that this goal represents a one-year goal, and the goal itself and actually getting alignment is probably a 5-year goal, I believe. I'm not exactly sure about that time frame, but it's an incremental closing of the disparities that we're looking at.
I'm
Correct.
just looking for,
And is this a 5-year 6.2? Is this a 4-year? Do we have any idea about that yet? I mean, that would help in terms of actually aligning our population with our outcomes.
We are looking to have this reduction over the course of the 14-15 school year. So compared to our overall numbers for 13-14, so that reduction is over the course of this year.
Okay, and then so next year we'd be looking at maybe 8.4.
Next year, we're going to continue to look at it and see if we're
And
disproportionate.
so it's a year-to-year basis, but the ultimate goal, exactly what Nancy was saying in terms of actually aligning the outcomes with the student population.
Well, in utopia, then everybody's perfect and we don't have any
Yeah,
disciplinary
but I'm
issues.
saying that don't we have to be judging ourselves against perfection? Or the others, it gets back to Eric's question, how do we come up with the 20%?
Yes, it would be most appropriate if the percentages match the overall enrollment or were less than the overall enrollment.
Do you mind if I just ask it a slightly different way? Do you think there's a realistic goal, a number to shoot for in a single year? Because obviously your
Absolutely.
overall goal is to make it, to get the best you can get. So whatever formula you use, but ultimately you're doing this over time. It's a cumulative effect. So is this a realistic goal to shoot for?
I definitely think it is, and due to our connection with MSAN, or the Minority Student Achievement Network, we took representatives of our administrative staff, so building principals, to an institute in April of this year, April 2014, and the entire focus was on addressing disproportionality with regard to discipline, and they immediately came back and were actually pressing me, well, what's our data say? Do we look like that? What kind of adjustments can we make? And immediately what we noticed was some of our just record keeping misrepresented what was actually happening in the building. So that was, one immediate step. It also encouraged conversations with their teachers, because now that this is information that their building leadership teams are looking at, they feel a little bit more empowered to have conversations with their colleagues about ways to interact with students and interact with their families. So I definitely see this as achievable over the course of the year, but it's going to take a lot of work. I mean, that's why when you see as part of the action step, really looking at our data on a regular basis and engaging in some of those difficult conversations. The other piece I want to point out about this, and it's not directly connected to why we chose Dr. Ford, but one of our sister MSAN districts, Arlington, Virginia, they wrote a book called Gaining on the Gap, and as they talked about their process in reducing the achievement gap and their discipline gap, they said the greatest difference was in making the data plain and available. So,
Say
because,
that again,
I said it is making the data plain and making it available, because the numbers are what they are. And so it allows us, again, and allow them to have conversations about what was actually happening, what we were reporting out.
Is it possible to, it was one of the things that we didn't have in the MSN report, and you mentioned other districts within the MSAN network. Is it possible to see where we stand in regards to our disparity in disciplinary issues compared to other MSAN districts, as well as, I would assume most of our neighbors who have come, like a Shaker and Euclid? I'd be very curious to see how we stand up in our disparity compared to other systems.
I know that isn't a data point that we keep as a collective network. I can inquire, though, to see if that's something that we can pull together.
Gotcha, thank you.
And the only final thing I'll say on this is just, and I don't think you need to handle this tonight personally.
Okay.
I think that in a statement like that, people will want to jump to conclusions. You can change the numbers by just don't do it anymore. Right? And clearly, there's a lot behind what you're doing in this, and there's a whole issue of understanding what it is, what causes it, who you talk to, how you help people understand, how you help people make better choices. And it's very clear from what you said earlier that that's all on your radar.
Thank you.
So are you going to, for tonight, or if not in the future, get into, saying that implement interventions, are you going to tell us what those interventions are?
Yeah, the specificity of it. We just recently made this, and this is rather broad because I'm giving you kind of the big picture. Some of the details are in your plan that are in front of you, but the subcommittee will be working on that work, and so we certainly can update you as we hash this out. But this goal was created probably a few weeks ago, I think, is when we actually solidified it. There's been a lot of conversation about it, but it has to be vetted through the district leadership team. That's the whole purpose of this, that we aren't just, Allison and I didn't sit behind closed doors and come up with it. It was, collective. And there's a lot of discussion around it. As Allison said, sometimes these are difficult conversations, but we work through it.
Well, and I'll say thank you for the invitation to come back again, because when we showed you the MCN report back in June, that was one of the things that we said we needed to do, was come back and identify what progress we'd made with regard to the plan that Dr. Willis laid out for us. And then we also had a cohort of students that just returned from the student conference. So they have a plan that they'd like to share with you about some of the things that they want to address, or they want to do to address the achievement gap and what their experiences are here in CHUH.
Nancy, can I poke at this a little bit? If we have a toolbox called interventions, we figure out some intervention that maybe we saw in Arlington or somewhere else, and we put it in our toolbox. And along the way, we have our team start thinking about other potential interventions and everything. So we have interventions in that toolbox right now, correct?
Yes.
Could you just say a little bit about what those interventions look like, or what they might be? Or is it too early?
As it relates to addressing discipline and disproportionality, so some of the recommendations that we are making.
Right.
I can list some.
It's related
Sure,
to
you
this
can, I can.
6.2 reduction in suspensions.
Yeah, some of our interventions they're in the plan, and so they're around our in-school suspension rooms can be seen as being punitive, but there's some things that we can do while students are in there to have them reflect on their behavior. Get at the root of why they're in there. Those kinds of things. Provide the Odyssey program that's just started at the middle schools, where they're doing some work with the pastoral counseling and working through that. That's a great means of an intervention. The Tiger expectations in and of themselves, those are positive behavior supports that we put in place, that we promote the positive as opposed to punitive means of discipline. So those are some of the things. I'm sure there are many more with our guidance and social work services. We're very fortunate to have those. And the wraparound services that you approved, I believe, the contract last board meeting, whereas the services, I think it's Belfair, is it? Yeah, I think it is going to be coming to Coventry and providing services for our students and counseling. So some more opportunities for kids that way as well.
And I don't know that I would refer to it as an intervention, but I'll give you an example. Again, not connected directly to suspensions or to discipline, but providing students an opportunity to share their voice and let the adults understand, what they experience on a regular basis. So just, I believe it was last week maybe, or week before last, Mr. Peak, Mr. Williams, and Mrs. Washington, who are our MSAN advisors at the high school level, hosted an ice cream social for our minority students who are enrolled in honors and AP courses, and then invited some of the younger students who, although they may not be enrolled in those classes, they could come in and hear what were those students' experiences. And just giving them that opportunity to kind of to share is extremely powerful, because it makes them feel like it matters. And then it also gives us an opportunity to address some of the concerns that have come up. So again, not directly, not technically an intervention, but it's about creating those spaces and creating those opportunities to hear and then address what our students are feeling and experiencing.
And to add to that, I think another one would be that our partnership with the county with our CTAG, the Closing Achievement Gap.
Right.
So now we're giving those students another leadership opportunity. And so students that may fall through the cracks for whatever reason now have a leadership opportunity through that program. So I think the main goal is, how do we provide instructional opportunities for students? And as you stated, not looking at our practices and now how we're coding incidents. That's one strategy. And making sure that we're giving students positive experiences and not being punitive for things that we could have, we could have given them another experience. So I think all our practices, and I like how you explain it, you stated this is something that we've all come together last year and looked at, and then we followed up with some opportunities for professional development for our staff last April, or June, whenever staff came together. And then this fall, we came together again to say, this is important to our work, and we know that there is a disparity, so we have to address it. And because the majority of our students in our district are African American, and we want all our students to achieve. So how can we close that gap and make sure all our students have some positive experiences by providing those positive experiences, but also looking at our practices as well and being transparent. The data is what the data is, but we got to close those gaps.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because it just triggered another thought with the professional development. We're having a series of professional development opportunities for teachers after school on the conflict cycle, and CHAMPS, which is a program that is a positive behavior support. So teachers will be getting professional development around that as well. So, and we're doing a number of things, and you'll see they're reflected in the document. I just, take all the time to go through each one would be, we'd be here all night. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask as you read through that. And so, moving along, now I have to put my glasses on. All right. So, progress check. Where are we at in regards to achievement? And this is the slide that's different that it was updated, and I'll share it with you when I email. But as you can look, you can see this relates back to our 1.76 goal. And so we were at an 87.2, 87.3 between last year and this year. Now, our goal is to make a 1.76 point gain. And so as you can see reflected here, we did not meet that. But in crafting our goal, our goal states that by 2018-19, we will receive a B on the report card. Now, right now, we're at a low kind of C, and 70% is a C, 80% gets you to a B. Now, provided the state doesn't change the criteria, we know the performance index is going to continue to be a measure on the report card. Who knows if that will change by 2019, but we know now it's staying, which is one of the reasons we selected this to measure our achievement. So if you look at the 1.76 and you add it up, and what we did is we just added it as we went along, you can see that actually by 17-18, if we show growth, we will get to the B in 17-18. But I remember last year we had some conversations about, the fact that last year we established this goal kind of mid-year, and so we didn't know that we were necessarily going to see the 1.76 between last year and this year. And so that was our goal. We were hoping for it, but it didn't happen. So now that we've had a year under our belt with the process, by the end of this year, it'll be year 2, implementing the process, we're hoping that we will then get back on track and increase each year to get to our ultimate goal of a B. And so this just kind of spells it out, the trajectory. The reason for the percentages, just briefly, the criteria to get a B is 96. You have to take this number and divide by 120. And so what you get, your percent, so you look at the percentage points, and so you get an 80%. So that's how the 96, you have to divide all of these numbers by 120, and that's how you arrive at the percentages. So it's actually, they look at 70 to 80% as the B as opposed to the raw numbers.
And what are the numbers that go into creating the numbers here for, 'cause,
Okay.
I mean, this is just, as a civilian, you look at this as just numbers.
Yes,
a
and
number.
Allison is going to give you that, I believe, in her
Right.
presentation. We'll be talking about performance index and how it's arrived.
Okay.
Yeah, it's derived.
Gotcha.
It measures all students and all test scores, but I know she'll go into length.
Okay.
I don't want to steal
Gotcha. That's cool.
your performance. Okay, so we have the progress check again in regards to climate. So if you recall, our goal was to experience a 10% reduction in the number of students receiving referrals. Last year, this was our district number, 2,314 students received referrals, and this was our number this year, students. And so we had a percent change of 1.55%. That's not our 10%, we recognize that, but again, through the things that we just mentioned, we're hoping that those will make a difference in reducing, as we stated, African-American students' suspensions, but if you look at overall, all students will eventually, we're hoping to reduce all students' number of suspensions. So we realize we have some work to do, so what are we going to do?
I'm sorry, when
Yes.
you say referrals, what are we tracking as referrals?
So referral is actually something that gets written up and entered into the computer, and we actually do it now online. But there can be little offenses that, if Allison's speaking out in class, it's just a verbal warning, those kinds of things don't get documented. But it would
Anything you
be
get written up.
fighting,
But it's
stealing.
not suspensions and expulsions, it's
Right.
anything of a disciplinary nature.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So that's a good point, that it doesn't equate to suspensions
Yeah, 'cause that'd be a lot,
necessarily. It's
yeah.
just referrals, which can be detentions, warnings.
And that could be the same student multiple times, correct?
No,
No?
no,
Not
not
in-
student
not
numbers.
in
Those
this
are,
one.
those are
Not in
individual students?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
So if we were to think about that 10% goal, embedded in that 10% goal is a percentage of African-American suspensions that we have to achieve. And I guess if we played it all out, at some level, we gotta have something that's going more than 10% if the suspensions of African-Americans are only going 6.2. You know what I'm saying? That if you laid it out, there'd have to be certain internal targets in order to meet that goal. And I'm just wondering to what extent we're talking about these other referrals and that kind of thing. So if we're going to make 10%, all of these have to have a target in terms of reduction, I think, wouldn't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
correct.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
pulling one out and saying this is 6.2 doesn't relate to anything until we get it embedded in the entire number, I think. So I wonder, to some extent, it might be, if we're gonna track this, it might be good for us to see the things that we are tracking, if you will. And that's my only point, really.
Can we
I
go
mean, the
back?
important thing is that we're being transparent, and like, as Allison has stated, the data's there, and we're gonna continue to show it. And people will continue to see those numbers as well. We'll be benchmarking those and showing that data as well.
Can we go back to the slide a second?
Yes.
Now, when you said, this isn't the, if I'm reading this, if I'm understanding this correctly, the number of students receiving a referral is 2278 in this current, in the previous school year, or in 13-14, right, because we're in 2013-14.
Right.
Our enrollment's 6,000 students. So you're saying that 1/3 of our student population at least received one or more referrals?
Right.
Okay,
Yes,
that's.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
right.
even that, whoa, that's very, thank you, that is,
It may be high, but I want us to go back to what they stated earlier. We have to look at our practices and what are we writing students up for? So if we don't really look at our practices and really, go back to maybe what you addressed, Ron, and said exactly what are we measuring? So if we're writing students up for a piece of gum or, rushing out without a hall pass,
Right, that's-
maybe those, so maybe those are some of the practice. So the number may be inflated because of our practices, but if we go back and say, you know what? We're gonna put these other things
Right.
in place so we can reduce those numbers, so the infractions that we are counting are really infractions that, that we, that we should. That makes
Yeah,
sense,
and I think we have to be really careful because we don't want our numbers to be reduced because we change, just simply because we changed our practices. So all of a sudden, we're not suspending kids and we're not writing kids. But that goes to the point that I was making about what are these things?
And we've had extensive conversation about that as well. We recognize that, in addition to educating children, keeping them safe and secure is a primary responsibility of ours. So the message is not, don't write kids up.
Right.
If there is an infraction
Right.
and students misbehave, and if, they are putting themselves or others in harm's way, or they are doing things that are inappropriate, then absolutely. And we have a whole guidebook that outlines when it is appropriate to write a referral. But I'll take you to an example of what we did with those building leadership teams, is we actually took a set of referral comments. So these are the notes that the staff member included in the referral that went to the administrator, and we just posted them and allowed the building leadership team members to read them. And we had them write down, so what do you think the infraction was? What do you think that this staff member indicated as being the reason for the referral? And the variance, the range of responses that came was astounding, because you've got Eric that doesn't write a referral, has excellent relationship with his students, so wouldn't write his student up for that, but maybe Nancy does, and so she sees it one way and he sees it another way. So again, just that awareness, and in some respect the shock of, that's over a third of our population, what's going on? So what is causing this difference in say, in some instances, how students' behavior is perceived versus what is actually, what's actually happening.
Nancy would be the softie and I'd be the hard. The one thing, I think, when we see numbers like this, so I think
I can second that.
there's no doubt about that. I think would be valuable, though, when seeing that number, spreading out what we're talking, is it Chuck Reynolds busting me for wearing a hat on my way out of the building versus I got into a fight? Those are vastly different things,
So
which I think.
as the data
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
and that information is readily available
Yeah,
to our staff members. They can look at it. It updates on a daily basis. So we are able to drill down to the individual, to the infraction, the time of day, the response. Because again, we just want to make sure that people are aware and build greater consistency across the board.
Yeah, and so we began to understand this a little bit better. Can we just have that little breakdown
Yeah.
on something?
Yes.
I mean, again, I think he's
I
right.
wrote the note to show you some of
Keeping
the,
my hat on is different from me fighting, so.
it definitely
And
is.
But
that's
there
a good distinction.
We're looking at them at the same time in this one.
Yes.
So if we started breaking it down, then we'd have a better sense of, whether there's something even the board needs to do in terms of policy.
Right, I don't think it would be as astounding if you saw the breakdown, because like we said, tardies are a big one at the high school. So if they're tardy to class and eventually they get written up, that's gonna show. And that's,
Yeah.
I don't wanna, negate that's, the importance of being on time, but between, an assault and tardy, there's a
Right.
big difference.
And
So,
I don't want to belabor it. When we looked at the top 3 infractions at the close of the school year, 2 of them were failure to comply and disruption. Well, there's a
Were
lot
what?
of failure to comply with directives and disruption. So there's a lot of subjectivity
Very
in those
subjective,
2
yes.
infractions, correct. So when you consider that those are the top 2,
Right.
that's the reason for the conversations and making sure that we're all on the same page.
And from my perspective, that is really the key. And how are we training and evaluating the teaching and administrative staff on those measures also? Because just as something as innocuous as the dress code policy and interventions related to that, the variation amongst the teaching staff and the administrators, it's legendary. And so I would imagine it's even more pronounced in interventions related to these disciplinary actions. So, I don't know that is, at that level of detail, I'm asking for that at this point, but I would hope that that's incorporated into your plan, that you're looking at it and looking at the disproportionality amongst the adults who are making those decisions.
Yes, we are, and I can provide you with some, again, not the full detailed reports, but with some examples of what
How
we're using
you're
to have
doing it.
conversations
Yeah.
with staff.
Because,
Yes.
I mean, it's always about, it's always about the adult's behavior.
I'll take the detail.
Okay.
I like the detail.
Okay to move on? So moving forward and addressing, what does year 2 look like? And if you'll see in your document, we have a little timeline. So those of you who can't see the document, it is online, but, and it's probably not the most updated. We are struggling to keep it updated because it's so frequent. But we look at timelines. One of the things is, the action step, how we're monitoring it, the person responsible, because otherwise we would not know how it gets done, and then an implementation timeline, and then we keep track if it's been completed or not. So in here you'll see what our timeline is for completion. But in year 2, some of the things that we're looking at in reading and math, as we talked about earlier, we have created some common formative assessments, but we also know that was our first attempt. And in recognizing that, we certainly have some work to do in revising them and making sure that they're the best assessment of student learning. So they're short snippets, but we do need to revise. We will have what's called kind of a jurying process of revising those. There's a real prescribed method of evaluating the assessments and making sure that they're better for next year. So we're doing that. We'll be doing that work this year. We also are providing teachers with research-based instructional strategies and resources. So we have some work to do. So how are we going to get better? Well, making sure that we're honing in on our most effective strategies that are happening in the classrooms and then advertising them and providing professional development for teachers on them. We also want to refine our tiered intervention of support. We haven't gotten so much to this one, and I know we have some work to do in terms of the core instruction for kids and then what supports and interventions we're providing for our students. So we want to kind of shore that up. And then in math, as we talked about, we'll be scoring, we'll be using a tool to determine, what math adoption will do. Or which series we will adopt. In that we're not doing it sort of willy-nilly that, oh, well, it's very subjective where I just like this one. We're going to be very, deliberate in our measures to make sure that we're selecting the best tool for our students. So in regards to climate, again, continuing our process, the student intervention, student assistance team and response to intervention processes are very important and instrumental in making strides with kids. So it's the conversations about kids that happen at those meetings and what are some things that we're going to do, what supports are we going to put in place. We need to continue to review that process and make it better. We also want to revise and reinforce our Tiger expectations. There's a big push. We know there's the Tiger Pause and the 5, and we want to make sure that we're promoting those and making sure that we have that across the board in all schools. Also, again, I talked about the professional development for the staff, so I won't necessarily go into that one again. We want to enhance our communications, and this is where we're building, where we took out that goal about the stakeholders, we're embedding it into this as an action step under climate. So the surveys, the satisfaction in regards to safety and security. And we've taken some steps towards that. We also, again, will be analyzing the data every 6 weeks. Again, there it is. It's there, it's real, we need to respond to it. And then the implementing of the interventions once again. So how will we monitor our progress? Dr. Dixon has asked me this several times about how do we know this process is working? So I finally have a concrete answer for her that I'll share with you this evening. And so, the question is, well, the Ohio Improvement Process, districts across the state are using it. So are we seeing results? And in some places we are, in some places we aren't across the state, to be quite honest. So how are we going to ensure that we're going to be successful with it? Well, we have to monitor our progress. And in doing so, this is also listed on your document. This is new. We just came up with what are called adult implementation indicators and student performance indicators, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But we've established dates in which we will monitor progress of both students and adults. So this isn't just about measuring student performance. We need to measure what the adults are doing to see if we're being effective in our practices and it's translating to student achievement. So we have dates established, and we also will review the progress that we're making and then the dates that are listed. And I'll talk to you, because this is where it sort of gets a little bit hard to understand for some of this. So I'm going to try to explain it the best I can, see how I do in my teaching skills, and you can evaluate that afterwards. But so the first part's not so bad. So the reading and math, we are going to monitor the adult behaviors in this way. we've given one survey and we've established some baseline data. So the Ohio improvement process is 5 steps. And without giving you all the details, it's around, the premise is around collecting data, analyzing the data, designing your instruction, making sure that teachers across are using the same strategies, then they're coming back and they're evaluating the effectiveness of those strategies that they did to design their instruction based on the data. Then they come back and it's a cycle, okay? And so there's a survey that correlates to each one of those steps. And so the teachers filled out a survey and they measured where they felt they were at the teacher-based level as well as the building leadership level. Everybody filled out a survey and they rated themselves. Were we proficient in this area? Were we developing? Where did we fall in step 1, which is collecting data? In step 2, analyzing. In step 3, the strategies, and so on. And so what we decided as a result, we determined the baseline data, which was around 61-62% of the people reported that they were proficient in the first 3 steps of that process I just described. We want to demonstrate at least an 80% proficient or higher on steps 1 through 3 as measured by the surveys. So we will administer that survey again in January and then in May, and we're hoping that we're at 60% now. Now it's self-reported, so that is the one little glitch in the process, but we are hoping to get to 80% by the end. And they use a rubric to determine. So it's not just, it's not, again, it's very prescribed. They look at a rubric and they measure, did we bring the materials, to become prepared with materials, et cetera, and it moves, on. So that's how we're going to measure adult behavior, to know if we're doing this process with fidelity. I know there's the F word that everyone, talks about, fidelity. The climate is where we were looking at getting 50% of all teachers, 100% of our paraprofessionals, 100% of bus drivers, and 100% of our lunch assistants to receive a minimum of 2 hours of professional development on improving culture and climate. So this is around classroom strategies. So questions we've had is, why only 50% of the teachers? Why 100% of the parapros? The way in which we're structured right now, we are optimistic that 50% will be more for teachers. But the way it's structured now with our in-service days, we already had it mapped out. Our waiver days have been approved and what we can do through the state. So we're really relying on some after-school activities, on self-reporting of workshops, in-services, college coursework that teachers, graduate work they might be doing. And we were able to do a lot of work with our lunch assistants, our bus drivers around the conflict cycle, and de-escalating students, that kind of thing. So we know that those parapros and bus drivers, lunch assistants are getting that training because we're providing it on those release days. So teachers, we're hoping that we'll get more. But again, we are in the process of establishing a baseline to see where we're at, how many people have already had the 2 hours, and then by the end of the year, did we reach our goal? So that's measuring adult behavior. Now to measure the student performance indicators, now this is where it gets a little tricky. Again, this is where I'm gonna do the best I can. So the reading and math, I'm gonna just skip for a minute because the other 2 are easier. So the climate is there will be the 10% reduction in the students receiving referrals. So that's how we're gonna measure that. We're gonna continue to collect data on that, as well as the goal around the suspensions for African American students. That's very easy to measure. So we have the data, we'll put it before people every 6 weeks. That's how we're going to measure. And at the district level, we will be measuring on these dates that are designed here, or that are listed on your document. Now, the reading and math. We administer what's called MAP, which is the measure of academic progress? Academic performance. We get too reliant on acronyms. So we administer that. And so we are looking at grades 4 through 10. And we are looking at the math and reading. And I'm going to show you a slide that will help explain this a little bit better. But this is a draft. We have not solidified this with our DLC groups yet. There's been some conversation about trying to make it easier. But what we're looking at, you'll see, we give an administration 3 times a year, or is it 2 times?
It's 3 times a year. In the fall, which is September and the beginning of October, between January and February, depending on the grade level band for students, and then again in May.
Right, so we're looking at the bookends. We're looking at the front end of the school year and the last part of the school year and the 2 administrations of this test. So we're looking at, I'll show you a graph. It's easier if
Andrea, can you go back?
I can.
Just to be, I mean, I know what you mean by that 3rd bullet, but the way that it's written makes it seem like what you're saying is African-American students suspended down from 93% to 86.8.
Okay,
And
okay.
I know that's not what you mean, the
Right.
overall suspensions.
You're better with the number you had
It's-
before.
It's what it was, I think, and this is where we are, and this is where we want to be. And that
No,
reflects
no,
the
I know that, I'm saying the
Okay.
way, I'm saying it's not of African-American students. It's of all
Percentage of
students from
suspensions.
93%
Okay.
African-American to 86.8.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
that, yeah, I mean, it's putting,
Yeah,
yeah.
Because it
Okay.
implies 93% or,
yeah.
Yeah, which is not the case.
Okay, I understand. Okay, I get you. Yeah,
so you're saying 86% is better?
yeah. We don't have this in any documents, I don't think,
We
but I
wanna
will
reduce it by
double check. I think I
6%.
just put in the purpose of this
Right.
presentation.
Yeah,
but I
we
will-
don't-
It's a nomenclature issue.
So, so this one here, with the map, looking at the math and reading. So we were gonna exceed in growth the difference between the end of the year and beginning year of assessment, and these are nationally normed RIT scores is what they're called. RIT stands for RASH units, it's just another term, but it's measuring performance, student performance. So if you look here, and hopefully you can all see, I'll give you an example of what we mean by our goals. So if you look at the national norm spring test, okay, these are the nationally normed tests, in grade 4, it's 206.7. If you look at the national norm in the fall, which again this is when you would actually give it first, and this is the second administration, you look at it, it's 199.8. So in other words, students would be here as the national norm at the beginning of the year, and they'd move to here at the end of the year. What we did is we took this score minus this score, and that would be the growth, which ends up being, let's see, 6.9, is that right? 6.9 or so. And then we take that number, and then we add it to what our students performed at in the fall. So in the fall, in 4th grade, they were at, I was looking at 4th grade, right? 197.6. So you add that 6 point, whatever we said it was, and then we come up with actually 204.5. But since we said we're going to exceed it, I just added a tenth of a point to make it 204. So we have to get the minimum of 204.6 to exceed it. Otherwise, we were just meeting or exceeded. We didn't want to say, we wanted to shoot for exceeding, and we're shooting for higher than this. So it's the amount of growth. We're showing the amount of growth. We want to exceed the growth between the two, the beginning of the year and the end of the year, based on the national norm RIT scores.
So
Average.
these are real numbers. And if we look at the 204.6,
Uh-huh.
that's what we're expecting when we measure in the spring?
That's correct. For fourth grade, and this is.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, I'm.
Yeah, for 4th grade reading, yep, you're right. And then what we had to do was, break it down by grade level, because every, norm is different, every average is different, and those are scale scores, those aren't, so, we had to base it, that's why we had to break it down. So we're revisiting this goal to see if we're comfortable with that as a district leadership team, or do we want to look at percentage of kids below that will exceed, we're toying with that.
What numbers go into the RIT number? How is that derived? Is that an aggregate of other tests, or where does that number come from?
It's a single test.
Okay.
And so it's a scale score that's determined based on the numbers of questions the students answer correctly.
So it'd be like akin to the old school Iowa test or something. It's basically, it's a test and it's a national,
Correct.
gotcha.
Yeah, and then this is math.
Do all students get this? I mean, across the nation? Or
It's not a
districts
federally
pick and
mandated
choose?
test, but districts have the options to pick and choose. We selected NWEA MAP. We actually brought it back to the district in the 13-14 school year because it is one test that meets multiple objectives. So it allows us to benchmark student performance over the course of the year. It's an allowable gifted screener determined by the Ohio Department of Education, and it's also an alternate assessment for the 3rd grade reading guarantee.
But I can tell you, seeing this, it's very exciting because we always say that there are alternative measures than just a report card. But we don't often look at and focus on those. So I appreciate bringing this up and letting us see it, and the fact that we're tracking it makes me feel really good about where we need to head in the future. So Thank you.
Right, yeah, sure, and this is how we will be measuring, we'll be benchmarking, and the district will be analyzing these results 3 times a year, and so this is how we'll be measuring the progress, to see if this is making a difference. So we're measuring adults, again, just to emphasize, and students. So hopefully, that's clear to you on how we were doing that. So I think that is the end. Any questions, or if we want to head into Ms. Bird's presentation, Dr. Dixon?
No, I think we go right into Allison. Board, your pleasure.
Can you
She's
disconnect one,
going to
please?
go over the report card data. Okay. Good.
So while we're transitioning, there are black folders on your tabletops. If you could grab those, there are some items in there that you might want to reference as I go through this information. Thank you. Okay, so my goal, and I will try to be mindful of the time, is to go over these 4 points. So we're going to look at the components for the 13-14 report card. We're going to want to make sure that you are aware of what the state of Ohio is asking of us with the new state tests that are being implemented this school year. There are also a set of new graduation requirements for students who are currently 9th graders or members of the class of 2018. And then while there are a number of resources that are available, I just want to highlight a couple of resources that we have been using. So in your folder, you should have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. You should also have a copy of the report card, and for our members in the audience and our viewing audience, the report card is available on the Ohio Department of Education website. It is over 20 pages, so it isn't something that we make multiple copies of and leave it out and available, but it is available for download from the ODE site. Also in your folder are a set of handouts. These are also created by the Ohio Department of Education. These are your yellow sheets. These are reference guides that go over the topics I'm going to talk with you or talk about with you this evening. Again, these are also available on the ODE website. You should see them in our buildings. We have asked the administrative assistants and principals and counselors to make copies of them so that they are available. They do a nice job of describing some of the changes in a clear, succinct form. And then we've also included a copy of the Cleveland Heights University Heights testing calendar. I know that there are many conversations going on about the amount of testing and what are the tests used for. So this is actually just represents the second semester, but one thing that I want to point out, I won't reference it throughout the talk, but I'd like you to take note that the items that are highlighted in that beige color are all of the tests that are required of us by the Ohio Department of Education. So, just a piece to consider. So we do work very hard to try to use tests that will allow us to make decisions across multiple areas. Okay, so it looks like everybody has the items.
The tan ones, basically, we have no, because of where we live in the state of Ohio, we have no control over them.
That is correct. Should we opt out, then there are penalties that go along with it. So I don't want to,
Right.
there is some choice, but there
Right.
are penalties that go along
Right.
with that. All right, so get going with the presentation. Talking about the local report card, there are multiple components that are measured, and so I'll go through each one of those. You'll notice the two at the bottom, the gifted indicator and prepared for success. Those are new measures that were reported on the 13-14 report card, and while there are grade letters given for that, they were just reported on, so it's not going to be a part of the overall component until 2016. So we'll start with achievement, and Dr. Selico referenced this in her presentation, so I won't spend too much time on it. I do want to highlight, though, the change that we will see with this 14-15 report card. So our performance indicators measure the percent of students who scored proficient or higher on the OAA or the OGT. So there are 7 indicators at the elementary level, 7 at the middle school level, and then 10 at the high school. And the target increased for the 13-14 school year. Before that, it had been 75% of students needed to be proficient in order to earn the indicator. And for 13-14, it increased to 80% proficient for students in grades 3 through 10 and 85% proficient for grade 11. With the new report card and the new tests, there could be up to 30 indicators that are measured. And I say can be and might, and when you speak to the people from the Ohio Department of Education, they often use the word currently because their decisions are based on the decisions of the state legislature, so they are apt to change. The other measure that goes along with achievement is the performance index. So it looks at actual individual student performance and the scale score that they receive and their level of their overall score. And these scores are weighted, so we'll take a look at that. And this, again, as Dr. Selico said, is one thing that will remain the same with the new tests. I referenced the data retreats that we have with all of our building leadership teams, and we have ongoing conversations with that group as well as with our administrators to just make sure that they understand that every single child matters and that it is through the process of reviewing their performance on a regular basis that we can achieve the goals that we have identified. So one of the things that we talked about from the district level, and then they had time to look at their own building level, was just how close were we? You know, when we see the number of indicators that we met, what needs to happen in order for us to meet more. So this was part of that conversation. Same thing with the performance index. I think, Eric, you asked, you know, what's involved in the performance index. Well, the different performance levels receive a point value, and those are the higher the performance level, the higher the weight or the points possible. So this is a breakdown of our students' performance or the total number of tests. And so, you know, when we ask the question, how close are we? Had we had 200 of the students who scored basic score proficient instead, we would have met the goal for the 13-14 plan. And so one might say, well, 200 tests, that's quite a bit. Well, not when you think that there are, I think, 8 different tested grade levels and multiple tests. So again, when you put it in perspective like this and you begin to match the numbers with the students, which is what we are working really hard to get our teams to understand, it's definitely possible.
So we're rating the individual student here. Is that correct? So we're talking about students, individual
Correct.
students.
It all is, but this measure in particular looks at and measures student performance, so individual student performance, not the aggregate.
And so if I'm proficient in math, what am I scoring?
The proficient scale score across the tested areas is 400, but the raw score needed to
So all of
earn
these
that
scores are weighted,
can
so-
vary, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, to say that they're weighted when we're referring to the scale score, they may vary. So the raw score or the number of questions a student has to get correct can vary from test to test and from grade level to grade level. But they equalize that by turning the raw value into the scale score.
So if we say that there are 120 is a maximum score that you can reach, what do you have to do to be basic? 96? Or do we know?
So the 120 points is the total points possible. If all of your students scored at advanced, then that would be the overall performance index, which is it's different from the student's performance level. And again, so that a student earning an advanced score is going to vary depending on the test and their grade level. So it might be for third grade reading, the advanced cut score might be 425, but for 8th grade science, it might be 445. It varies. The ODE does provide their statistical summary. So if you'd like to see the specific raw scores with the grade level, with the measure or the test, I can
Some
provide that
level,
for you.
when I'm not sleepy enough, I guess I could.
Okay. Another measure is the graduation rate. So this is actually reported a year after the class. So this, on the 13-14 report card, we're actually looking at the graduation rate of the students from the class of 2013. And that's always been in place. You look like it.
Now, when we do graduation rate, I remember years ago, the state they took your students in ninth grade, students in 12th grade, just divided the number, and that was your percent. And we had a ninth grade retention problem, so we were only graduating like 50%, and Beechwood was graduating 110%, which is actually physically impossible. When we're talking graduation rate, is it the kids you had enter your system as a high school student, and then how many of them actually graduated? Because as opposed to if they transferred out, does that count against us? Because it seems, I know from looking at some of the numbers, it's like, hey, if they transfer out, we don't know where they went, that doesn't, they transferred. I might.
Counts against us.
But it counts against, I mean, that really
Yes,
seems like
it does.
It does,
disingenuous,
the way they-
it's a disingenuous
Yeah.
number then.
It does. and
Because we need, when I would. we
So
need-
you are correct in
Yeah,
that we
that's-
now use a cohort model. So the state considers the number of students who enrolled as ninth graders, and so the percentage who graduate in 4 years, and then the percentage who graduate in 5 years. And even when a student withdraws, we still have a responsibility to track them and ensure that they enrolled in another school. If they don't, then it does count against us. They are considered a dropout on our end. My EMIS coordinator is awesome. She and our social workers at the high school level try everything in their power to track students down, to find out, where they are. But it is a challenge because, if a family says we're leaving, we're
Right.
going to enroll in school district A, and school district A never requests their transcripts and uses their state ID, then it does count against us.
Well, yeah, because I mean, that really, when I look at our graduation rate, I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure our graduation rate is better than that, but it's because of the way the state's doing their methodology versus actual, student, your example right there. If we lose contact, that doesn't mean that they dropped out of Heights High. They left to go somewhere else, but it's very disappointing and frustrating that the reporting methodology it's not there's a dropout and then you lose track of, and that's.
Yeah, but we don't have a remedy for that right now.
That's right. When you go to the Ohio Department of
Right,
Education
exactly. That's-
website, you can
exactly.
see the contact person. If you'd like to express
Right.
Yeah, and it might
express
be
that to
that we
them.
begin to talk to students about them relating to us, and that if they leave, that we would want to be able to be in touch with them and so on and so forth. Maybe that becomes part of our expectations, that we say we're welcome to high school or whatever. We're expecting to graduate you in 4 years. If for some reason you leave, we'd like to know and be able to be in touch with you. I'm saying that there may be some things that we can do on our part in terms of how the student relates to somebody in the system, the guidance counselor, the social worker. Somebody in the system ought to have a relationship with every kid that walks through our door. And if we do have that relationship, I think we'll get the information we need, or most of it.
But if they have a unique identifier, a number, a student number, and so if they do re-enroll in another district, it isn't counted against us.
If they
If they-
enroll in the district that they indicated at the time of withdrawal.
Okay.
And everything matches up, then it isn't counted against us. If they say they're going to District A and they actually go to District C and we report A, then there's a problem. But if
Okay.
we can track it down to that point, chances are that we can, make the proper adjustments.
Okay.
When students move out of state, they have a new state ID. It doesn't,
Right.
it's not the same
I mean-
thing or the same
Right.
system.
I mean, I guess my issue is that there's your true, I hate to say the phraseology dropout, but you have a student who truly drops out of high school versus a student who transfers and we lose track of them. Those are really two different cohorts, and unfortunately, I think it appears from the state of Ohio, from the way they collect data and they report it, it's almost immaterial, is that if you lose a student, you lose a student. And I think that's why I look at we have a high transitory population, and because of that, it's my issue. I'm very disappointed because I think our true graduation rate is higher than what it is, but because of the reporting methodology, it doesn't come across that way.
Well, and I will say that the current rate, while we still have some work to do, again, living in utopia, you want it to be 100% of the
Right.
students that we are able to either graduate ourselves or that we ensure that
Exactly.
they make it to the new district. This rate is the highest it's been since, it's even higher than before they made the transition to the cohort model. So even with those barriers and those
Right.
concerns in place, we are still on an upward trend as it relates to graduation.
How do I know we lose some students, but we also gain students. So we're contributing to somebody else's graduation rate when we graduate these students. I mean, we don't get any credit for them at all, is that correct, on the graduation rate?
No, we do.
Somebody comes in the
It's
10th
by,
grade.
it's by numbers.
Say that again?
I said it's by numbers. So if you have 400 students who,
Okay. So it's
who
raw
start-
numbers that we're dealing with, okay.
so
Okay.
another measure is gap closing. So it replaced what we know as adequate yearly progress from the previous No Child Left Behind. So AMO stands for Annual Measurable Objectives. So there are 3 different AMOs that the state of Ohio looks at. It's reading, math, and the graduation rate. So these are moving targets. The percent proficient increases each year. And the rationale behind that is that overall, so as a state, we will reduce the percent of students not proficient by 50% over I think it's 5 years. This looks at subgroup performance. So it looks at the level of proficiency for all students, the different racial or ethnic subgroups, as well as socioeconomic status, students on IEPs or students with special needs, and English proficient or English language proficient students. When we talk about the measures, it's important to remember that Cleveland Heights is compared against all other students in the state of Ohio, and that you do have to have at least 30 students in each group for that measure to count. So this is the most challenging calculation, but you earn points in various ways. If you meet the target, the percent proficient is equal to the areas highlighted there, then you automatically receive 100% or 100 points. If your improvement from the current year is greater than the gap, you can receive 100 points. If your improvement isn't better than the gap, or you didn't meet the target, then you only earn partial points. Now, the ODE has said that even though these are the proficiency levels are indicated right now, they may change them after the new tests are rolled out and they receive the scores for those. So again, these are the percentages laid out right now, but those may change once we get through this first round of state testing.
So what is our expectation in terms of this changing to the AMOs versus the AYP?
It's still,
I mean, do we expect, it looks like the AMO might be a little bit more challenging than the AYP.
you know, in a nutshell, it still looks at, again, that idea that every child matters, and that, you know, we have to look at the performance of those students who don't traditionally perform as high as others. So it's same thing, different title. The progress measure, also referred to as value added, it looks at the growth made from one year to the next. So they take the students' scores from the spring of 2012, and those were compared to their performance on the test in the spring of 2013. Right now, they look at performance in grades 4 through 8, because that allows them to compare third grade to fourth grade. There is not, at least right now, a value-added measure for high school students, because there isn't a there wasn't a ninth grade test. When we talk about value added, again, they look at the performance or the growth of all students, at the performance of gifted students, the lowest 20% in the state. So they put all the students' scores together, they give them an NCE and rank them from highest to lowest, and then they look at the performance of the 20% in the entire state, not just the 20% in Cleveland Heights, University Heights. Then they also measure students on IEPs. And I pause and say that value-added measure was not, we did not look at the high school, because actually with the new state test, we will have measures in grade 9, and so there will be value added at the high school. New this year for the 13-14 school year is the K-3 literacy component. So it looks at a couple of different things. One is, again, the progress from one year to the next. in grades K, 1, 2, and 3, measured by the state reading diagnostic. And we actually have the opportunity to use a different measure other than the state test if we wish. And so we use the KRA to measure reading readiness for students in kindergarten, and then we use DIBELS in grades 1, 2, and 3. Students who are identified as not being on track are supposed to have reading improvement plans, and then those are mailed out to the families by September 30th. This measure also looks at performance on the third grade reading OAA, and it's tied to whether or not students are retained because they are not proficient readers. So in order to avoid retention, students needed to earn a 392 scale score on the OAA, and the state has increased that value from 392 on the 13-14 to 394 for this year. As I mentioned before, MAP, so NWEA MAP is a tool that or test that we administer throughout the year. The good thing about that is that it can be used as an alternate assessment. So if students don't meet the 392 cut score, they didn't meet the 392 cut score, we were able to use an alternate measurement in order to say that they did have the skill set that they needed to move on to the next grade level. And then you saw the presentation already from Ms. Calloway, who ran the summer intervention. So our third graders and every other third grader in the state of Ohio sat for the fall OAA on October 7th. And so we will have those results, and families will receive those results in the beginning of December. So we'll have an idea of how many of our students were proficient. Another new measure that was reported this year is the Prepared for Success measure, and this one focuses solely on the high school. And what it does is it looks at measures that the state identifies as students being college and career ready. So they ask us to identify the number of students participating in certain programs like dual enrollment or PSEO. They ask us to take count of the number of students receiving an honors diploma, those who have received special industry credentials, and most often those are connected to our career tech courses. They look at participation and performance on the SAT and the ACT, as well as advanced placement tests. This year and last year, we actually administered and paid for all of our students, not all of our students, for students in grades 10 and 11 to take the PSAT in preparation for this measure and to identify AP potential. So, trying to connect, this is not a required test, but it can be used for gifted identification. And it gives us an idea of where our students are in terms of not needing remediation and encouraging them to participate for the SAT as 11th and 12th graders. So a couple of the highlights, I already mentioned the graduation rate. So we had a positive increase, and that has been up again. We're at 0.9%, which is higher than before they changed the way we're measuring it. The gifted measure, although it is new and we only reported that information, we did earn an A in value added. And then 4 A's in the progress component. We were one of only 2 districts in Cuyahoga County who achieved that. The other district, it was Orange. And then one of only 27 districts in the state of Ohio that was able to accomplish that.
Allison, can you just kind of briefly let them know what it means that we're making progress based on the students that are coming to us? Because I think that's something we need to highlight, that we are making.
Absolutely. Just as you said, so that value added to that progress measure says and the fact that we received all A's is that when kids are with us, we are able to demonstrate that we move them. Eric, I think it was you that referenced, we have a high mobility rate. So we have a, population of students that a large population that comes in and out frequently, but when kids are here and they are with us for over a year, even if they are performing considerably below grade level, those measures say that the work that we do makes a positive impact on them or has a positive impact on them. And not too many other districts can show that.
Right.
I think it's also important, and this is with the new measure, even with our gifted students. So you see that as well. So even with our top performers, one of the big complaints that it's still going on is that it's very difficult to show growth or have a high impact with those highest performing students. So the fact that we also earned an A in that gifted measure shows that it doesn't matter. You don't have to be, that we aren't only capable of moving students who are low performing, but we're also able to meet the needs and move those that are on the higher end as well. So,
And before you get to this last slide, we'll wrap this piece up and then we're gonna have you both come back and start us off at 2014 to 15. Because I think this next slide will end us at the 13, 14 year and what we've done, the accomplishments that we've made, and then we start the next year at the next meeting because we have another agenda item.
I understand how that goes,
And we
yes.
don't want to keep everyone too late, but I think it would be a natural break that would sum up the 13, 14 data, and then the next meeting we'll pick up on the 14, 15 goals.
Certainly.
Is that okay? Okay, board, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one thing that I would say, I see that you're gonna have you've had some exams that have taken place, I guess, in October, and you'll get some results in December.
correct.
Is the third grade K through 3 literacy is the only results we'll have at that point, or will we have other results?
We will have results from the third grade reading OAA, and we will also have results from the fall administration of the OGT. So the students who sit for that OGT in the fall are those who have taken the test before, but still need to earn a proficient score in one or more areas.
Well, this is an important conversation that I feel like we as a board need to have, and I'm thinking that maybe in January or February, we ought to have a work session that's devoted just to this, and because I think this takes an entire work session from my standpoint. So I'm hoping that the other board members would agree with that, and because I don't think we can every slide that you put up, we could deal with it for probably 10, 15 minutes.
You could.
So, I'm leery of trying to just cram it in and just so that we've done it. I want us to do it in such a way that we are deeply immersed in it and understand it. So, if that's okay with everybody, are we gonna stop here, or we got one more slide?
This is one more, you got, just give an overview of the
Okay.
13, 14 year.
Okay.
That concludes the 13, 14. The next pieces, we're going into the new state tests.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a positive byproduct of this is now the federal tax code seems much simpler. The only thing I would encourage, you said, I just want to encourage you as you go forward and as you talk about this, clearly a lot of what you're talking about are things that if we want to be funded by the state, we have to do. But I think I really would encourage you to always keep in mind what you said. This is about every student succeeding. This is about what are our standards? And so I'd encourage the staff, even knowing what the implications are of not doing these things, I would encourage us to look and challenge some of the things that are being forced upon us, because this is relatively complex, and I'm not sure that some of it is that well thought out. Not by you, by the way, just to be very clear, by the state, so.
Well, I really do appreciate this presentation, and I think, are there any other comments from the board?
Well, I've always said, in my opinion, you got to go into the detail, because when you go into the detail, it tells a much different story than the aggregate we see in the plain dealer.
That's right.
I think and what's most impressive to me at least is when we talk about it's something we've always spoken about, but now the state's actually acknowledging it, is our ability to transform student performance in a year or two. We're one of 27 districts in the state of Ohio having this A. I mean, in my opinion, that's very impressive.
We need to write out an article.
And the fact that the district has used this Ohio improvement process, I think for 1 year that the district has actually adopted this process, and to be able to have it systemic throughout the district, I think says a lot to that what the district has, the talent that's in the district. I mean, that's 1 year. They started last year, and this process is in the second year. And other districts in the state are modeling what we're doing with our OIP process. Although it was mandated But I think it kind of shows that we have some talent in our district to be able to implement this process in the way that we have. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much. And I think we should take a 10-minute break to get ready for our next part of the work session. Okay? Okay, we're back in session. 10 minutes went. Okay. I turn it over to Steve Chagallus. Steve?
Okay, good evening. So we have an update from Gary Baylaw and the team this evening, and Steve Zanoni is here, and John is here, and Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
We are now in the design development. Can everybody hear me?
You better pull it up a little bit.
We are in the design development phase, and this tonight, the report tonight is basically an update. Design is, some people, kind of look at it as discrete phases, programming, schematic design, design development, construction documents, construction. We don't really, in this kind of project, we don't really see it that way. It's more of a kind of a continuum. We're always kind of moving through and developing. And so this is kind of a snapshot of where we are at currently. And it's more of a report than it is a lot of documents. So right now on the site plan, you have seen the last time we were here, we presented several options for your consideration. All those options obviously have a different impact on the way the site is eventually going to develop, and then all those options have an impact on your budget. There may be some other options that are a combination of what you've seen in those 4 or 5. There is a traffic study. There was some additional information that was requested by the City Planning Commission. So there's a traffic study update that is being prepared. They're going to look at, I think there was some information that was missing in terms of the amount of traffic and the times of traffic that you have on Washington, on Goodnor, and then also the traffic on Cedar, because as a part of this, we have an opportunity, the city is making some changes on Cedar, so we have an opportunity to potentially change the signal locations to coincide with the circulation that we are going to use on the site. One of the questions that we had the last time, which is still a valid question, which is what is the real number of parking spaces required? Because you currently have, I think, about 228 parking spaces on site. I've been here at different times during the day. I've been able to pull up to the front door, or the front door, which is really the back door of the building, and get a parking space. Other times, I've been here in the morning or in the afternoon and I haven't been able to find a parking space anywhere close to the building. So that's one of the questions that still needs to be answered. I think the traffic study that's being prepared will address some of that. We also are in the process of developing sustainable strategies for stormwater management, landscaping, and then obviously once we kind of determine the final parking arrangement, we'll look at maybe some different paving materials. We will be meeting with the Planning Commission this Friday on the 21st to review site development. So at that time, we're going to go over in depth those options that are currently on the table. In particular, we're interested to get their reaction to any type of development of parking on the streets, even though that was a informal suggestion which they have heard, but we have not really had an in-depth discussion about the potential to do that.
Yeah, and Gary, just to be clear, for the board and the community, we are not having a formal meeting with the City of Cleveland Heights Planning Commission. This is an informal meeting with their administrative staff, the Director of Planning and his staff at Cleveland Heights.
And that's a good thing, because what they require in the formal meetings really is the site pretty much fully developed and detailed And at this point, we're really kind of still working through potential uses on the site. We are also continuing to develop the floor plans. We've had our first round of meetings with key faculty, staff, and administration, and I thought the meetings went really well. We got a lot of real good meaty information. We're in the process now of incorporating that. The plan, I just want to be clear that the plan itself did not change substantially. What we're talking about is obviously some of the other things we're doing is we're adjusting the plan to coordinate our structural and mechanical systems. And there are modifications that we need to do to kind of, as we go through, there are additional egress implications, ADA and that kind of stuff. But when we meet with the faculty and the staff and the administration, we're really talking about what is happening. In fact, Brian was just up here and he'd requested some dimensions on some room sizes so they can start to look at potential options on different science, furniture, or tables. So we've had that dialogue. What we will do during this process is we typically go back, now that we've received that information, we're in the process of kind of amalgamating that information onto the drawings. We will we'll go through another round of meeting with those same folks, and they'll critique what we thought we heard and presented back to them, and we'll make additional changes, and then we will come back a third time and ask them to sign off on that. And at that point, this doesn't prevent our engineers from moving forward and starting to do their layouts. But what we'd like to do is probably accomplish sometime before the end of December to have all those all of those areas finalized and all the details ironed out for the interiors in terms of the layout of those spaces, all the spaces. We're also working on the HVAC central plant, and as we heard at the last meeting, we are going to be doing a hybrid geothermal and a full geothermal central plant alternate. Alternates. I think we've explained before that everything after the central plant in terms of the distribution inside the building, the systems is pretty much the same, but the central plant does have an effect upon the controls for that area and the major pieces of equipment. So we will be looking at both of those. At the end of design development, we'll present costs for these and a whole list of other alternates for the district's consideration. And my assumption is at that time that you will, as a board, or as a body, you will prioritize those things and then make some kind of decision as to what we would move forward with through construction documents.
Gary, can I interrupt?
Sure.
So and maybe Steve, this is for you, your use of the word alternate, does that mean alternate as we've come to understand it, or because at our last meeting, I don't feel that we had any type of consensus or in-depth conversation to say, we want this only bid as an alternate. So say more about what you meant by that.
Well, during the design development, and it's kind of, we've been using alternates kind of loosely.
Right.
And I'm glad you pointed it out. During the design development stage, we're going to have them design all three systems through DD. That'll allow us to then do the pricing at the end of design development for all three. We may find at that point in time that, look, we might not do the central plant. Maybe the hybrid becomes sort of the base of the project, or we have monies available to do one of these as a base. And when we get to the point of the GMP, our hope is that we have a base set, and then beyond the base, we would do the classic alternates that we did on the stadium, which is where it's not in the GMP, but then there are alternates and you get alternate pricing if there's savings. I would say right now, it's so in flux in terms of, because we've got to look at this in terms of the overall budget, that we might discover that there are ways to make one of these three as the base in the GMP. And we really won't know that until we get through this design development stage. So we're really looking at all three systems.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to go a little bit further. I think the fact that we will have calls for these and other alternates indicate that there is not just necessarily related to the HVAC, but there may be others as well, or this is all
Yes.
just related to the HVAC?
No,
It's beyond HVAC,
the
right?
implication here is that you are going to have basically a laundry list of potential upgrades. You know, it's
Okay.
the additional high bay CTE space is one, the additional 2 lanes for the swimming pool.
Then that brings into the question of what the base looks like, because last time we went at this, we were like looking for 7.4 million. Are we gonna find the 7.4 million? Here is the basic piece, and then all these other pieces of the alternates outside of that 7.4?
Yeah,
What
we're-
It was 3.4. It was in 7.4 million.
we were looking for 7.4.
No, we were looking for 4%, which was about.
3.
It was about 3.2, 3.4.
Okay,
We were over, and
Right.
we're working on that through the design development stage, and we feel really confident we can get those numbers in line.
so when we start discussing these alternates, we'll have that base number
That's right.
within budget.
That's correct. We have to. We can't present you something that you can't build.
And then alternates would be beyond budget.
That's beyond budget, and if there are savings, we would buy those alternates, bid savings. But
Okay.
on the issue of the central plant, we're working very hard to see if we can limit the number of alternates on the central plant. And so we're working very hard to see if there's some ways to maybe to get the hybrid into the base, which would be great if we could get there at the end of design development. So we've instructed the design team to really work very, very hard, and the construction management team, at trying to get some of those elements in, have less alternates, Ron, is really what we're saying.
Okay.
One of the other things that we'll be developing is looking at, and there's been a desire on the part of a lot of folks in the district to use the building as a teaching tool. And so, there's kind of an approach that we call, a utility dashboard, where there would be, besides maybe some stations at other parts of the school, maybe the main central plant may have something where students can come in and actually, actively monitor what's going on. I don't know if they can control everything, but they'd be able to monitor. It would be really significant in terms of making that available to the students in terms of utilizing it. One of the things that we would like to see along with that, what we don't want to do, so this kind of goes back to Dr. Dixon and Zorba Ross and others, the curriculum director, is that I think the point of this is not that what we don't want to do is put something in there and then not have it used as part of the curriculum. So at the same time we're thinking about these things, someone on the education side should be concentrating on how can we actually use these how can we actually utilize something like this as part of the curriculum and use it as a teaching tool. So that would be good. We are working on developing the building exterior. Fenestration is a word, all architects like to throw around. Really what it is, it's just the openings, the window openings, the door openings in the building. So we're refining the fenestration and keeping in mind that we need to still have a daylighting strategy. We have been working on simplifying what we call the roof architecture. some of the clear story that we had in the previous models. That was one of those items, Ron, that we had talked about in terms of kind of trying to simplify things, still keep the intent and that daylighting strategy, but maybe make some of the structure simpler. So that's what we've been doing. We've been adjusting the building volumes and the massing. And then also a big part of this is looking at, for at least the major additions that are on the southern, or is it the southern half, or northern half of the building, looking at materials, and we're developing walls, starting to develop wall sections, which tells us structurally what we're doing. So we're looking at those kind of systems also, and working with the CMR to have construction that's practical and cost efficient, besides delivering the type of aesthetic that the district would like. So, looking ahead, as I said before, we'll continue to meet with faculty and staff and the administration to develop the final floor plans and all the characteristics and spaces. We like that the Planning Commission has stated that we can meet with them informally. A lot of times, in some cities that we work with, they want to kind of keep everything a secret, and they want to see everything at once, and then they tell you, go home, it's not approved. They have said, we can meet as many times as you want to kind of talk about things so that it gets developed. And there's no, and by the time you bring it to the full Planning Commission board, that everything, all the little things have been tweaked and worked out. So we're going to, as a part of the DD package, we have to develop specifications, but specifically, we're looking for specifications that use sustainable products. We will develop the final exterior building design and details, and then we also have, along with the Planning Commission, we also have to meet with the Architectural Board of Review. As I said before, the building as a teaching tool is something that's important, so there are other things that will be going on inside the building and on the building exterior that will be used for that. And then, as I said initially also, that we'll have a list of project alternates and cost estimates for the Board of Education to consider.
Gary, as we talk about the building as a teaching tool, since the students are going to be away for a couple of years, will we have the ability to do or see that interactive stuff that you talked about over at the Wiley campus?
Ron, say that again, I didn't hear part of it.
Well, what I was asking is, if the students are going to be away for 2 years, will they have an opportunity at the Wiley campus to have some ability to interact at that while they're at Wiley, not just waiting for them to come back, but they can see, what you were talking about in terms of what they could see?
Yes.
And maybe it wouldn't be completely interactive, but I'm wondering if we're thinking about them being able to see that as it's developing, because we will have some 9th and 10th graders over there that might return and graduate from this new high school that they've been playing around with for a minute. And in other words, I'm saying the teaching tool is not when they come back to the new building, but it could be also while they're away, I think, but I'm not sure.
Gary's not designing Wiley, so I don't want to put him on the spot, but there are limitations. Certainly this dashboard, we don't have that kind of piece in the Wiley building. There's a reason. The way the Wiley systems are going to work they're sort of, the modulars are independent for HVAC systems from the main building system. We also, those kind of systems, they're really called control systems. They're fairly expensive, and to make that kind of investment in that building that we're not going to keep is questionable. But I will ask. I think it's a good question.
Well, I'm not advocating for that yet. I'm just asking the question because there may be other ways to have teaching, to be doing teaching.
I'm going to make a really radical suggestion, and someone's probably going to smack me down. But and because I'm going to put Fred on the spot from Gilbane-Ozanne. During the construction of the building, I think it would be appropriate if you are planning a class in the future that is going to, and let's say the 9th and the 10th graders are going to move into at the high school. It would be great, I think, that when the building envelope is kind of dried in and they start to install some of these systems, particularly if you know, even with the geothermal, it would be great to take those students on a field trip.
Field trip, right?
Right.
Field trips are always good.
That's what I
Students
was
like
thinking.
field trips. But it would help them understand maybe what is hidden in some sense inside the building that operates. It would give them, it would help them have a better understanding when they're looking at, you know, some
So
gauges,
we gotta
et
have
cetera.
6,000 hard hats now, right?
That's right.
Just teasing.
Our construction manager can afford it.
Right.
I thought ninth and 10th graders had pretty hard heads. So I would like to, just for the heck of it, I'm going to show that site plan sketch.
Yes, thanks. Gary, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
As I said, when I talked about parking, this scheme here, and this is just a sketch, and nobody's,
Let's hope. Because we're paying you a lot, if that's more, no, just kidding.
well,
That's a construction.
what happens is sometimes the ideas fly so fast that you can't do it on
You know, I'm kidding, Gary.
The notion here is that we try to maximize. I've added some additional parking back here. Because this, on the original plan, there was, the base plan was parking around the perimeter of the building, which had, I think, 78 or 80 spaces, something like that. So I added a few spaces here, added a few spaces here. And in one plan, there was about 27 spaces here that were added. This is Washington up here.
Those are the cut-in spaces?
Yes, this would be the angled parking off of Washington. And there's some parking spaces in the service yard that's a part of the building, and then added a few spaces here. And then what I did, your softball field, if the regulation is about 235, maximum 250. So this line here is about 250, 245. And your baseball field, if you take the current outfield line of the fence, which is maximized by this, by home plate going out to there and just taking it around, you could get another a lane and two pieces of parking here. You currently have 228. Now, I'm not showing any parking over here because I don't know what's going on yet, but you have about 40 over there now.
And
This
that
gives-
40 is included in that 228?
Yes.
Okay.
And so with this right here, gets you about 180 to 185. And that, you know, the pinch is right here. And you know, you could think about maybe you take home plate and you put home plate here so that you're batting away to the outfield. In softball, I don't know what kind of hitters you got here, but I don't know if you get too many. I don't know. And you may have to do, obviously, even with this, that you're going to have to do some additional fencing.
We have to
maybe
have a 19-foot wall like Jacobs Field.
Well, you know what it is, you know.
Oh, it's not Jacobs Field.
You know, during the season, maybe it's just a high net that catches some of the foul balls. So anyway, what this does is it says, if there's if there's no reluctance on the part of the city to maybe put these spaces here, the parking along, if you try to do this up here, there's a grade differential here. It makes it
Yeah.
difficult. There is also the potential here to do some parking. I'm not so crazy about doing it on Goodmore, but you could get, maybe if it did some parking here and we tweaked it, you could probably get close to 200, you know, with maybe a little bit of parking here. So
The 180 to 185 does include the 27
it
cut-ins?
includes the 27.
But not whatever we end up doing when we make whatever determination around the
Correct.
track? Okay.
So what's the outfield on the baseball field?
Currently on the baseball field, you are only at about 280, something like that.
280 from the backstop or from home plate?
No, from home plate.
280 is plenty.
You play?
Really?
Yeah, I play baseball.
You playing now?
I play now.
Not with aluminum bats.
Go out
and-
tonight?
Well, aluminum bats might be a problem.
Yeah.
Do you have any,
No, 280 is bigger than probably 60% of the major league right fields right now.
okay, I'm cool with that.
Well, that's, yeah, okay.
Do you have a sense on Washington, not the bump out, the two drives towards Goodner and Lee Road, approximately, do you have a ballpark idea, no pun intended, on parallel parking? How many spaces we have if we had parallel parking as well? I mean, I would wonder if the city would be open to having that be staff parking.
You're talking about parallel parking
Parallel
on
parking
Goodnow?
on Washington.
On Washington,
On both
you mean here?
sides.
Just
Yeah,
there.
On both sides?
on both sides. I mean, right now you can, or
You can,
What's that?
can you parallel park? You can't parallel park there.
I'll tell you what,
It's not
I'll tell you
Right
what.
now-
wide enough
right now
for
you
both
can.
sides, is it?
Not on both sides.
on our side, which is what currently is there. But there's I believe right now it's limited.
I have and I'm sorry I didn't ask this question before, maybe somebody, George Pickett or somebody knows, but when I pull out of the parking lot now at 2:30 or 3 or whatever, there are one or two buses that are parked on Washington. What are those buses waiting for?
Special needs kids.
Special ed. So if we have this blister over here for special ed, those buses would be parked over here to pick up. Okay, so there would be nobody, there wouldn't be buses parked out there. You may have parents queuing up here and over here to come in and pick up, but the buses would not be there. Because the buses to me are a problem because I can't see around it when I pull out.
Now, if we look at the west side of the building, and we put the handicap buses right there where you were pointing,
Right here,
how do they get in there?
right there.
Okay, but we got one-way traffic?
Well, yeah, they go right turn off of Cedar northbound.
This would be one way here. It would be,
Going off of Cedar,
yeah, it would be.
and then, okay, so they'll pick up there and they just go out to
And then they
Washington?
just go out
Right.
and they would either go
Okay, that would work.
east or west.
How many handicap buses do we have at one time?
Two.
Just two? So that's all we would need, space for two buses? Well, I know if we get into athletic contests and stuff like that, we might be talking about something a little bit different. But if we only have two on a daily basis, that might be real work.
That's current, it could change next year based on needs.
Three.
But it wouldn't go up to 10 next year. Or maybe not even 5.
No, but this plan gets you 1 to 185, and ignoring whatever we have, whatever the final plan comes by the football field. So theoretically, we could pick up another 10 to 20 or 30 if we, depending on what we do there. So I mean, this seems like a nice, healthy medium between all the different ideas we've been
It
seeing
sure
so far.
does.
What, I realize that this would only be a ballpark, Gary, but the completely paving over one of the two fields, my memory of your presentation was that it was around $440,000, is that correct?
That was the estimate that we were
Okay,
given.
so what are the budget implications for this expansion, additional, from my memory, it's only, you're only talking about that expansion around the softball field?
Yes, because for the most part, we still have, we always had a
Right.
drive here and a drive here. We've added a few spaces, and those, we didn't add a whole lot.
Yeah,
I talked to Jeff Long from Gilbane, and he said that if it was, I could give you a figure because you could prorate it. You could take the number of spaces that were in that lot for that cost, divided by the number of spaces, and then just multiply
Yeah.
the number of spaces that you're gaining here by that, and you could get an approximate. I can't off the
so,
top of my head.
that's okay, I would wanna know that, and then also know the environmental and stormwater management implications for that, whenever, I guess eventually you'll get into some timeline here, but
Yeah,
whenever we're gonna need to make this
I think the options for stormwater
decision.
is detention is either underground or try to utilize some of these kind of interstitial spaces for some type of bioswales or filtering areas.
So if we go with the geothermal, were we gonna put those, were we
Under
gonna
the
do the
fields.
digging right there at the fields?
Right there.
Under the fields.
So that it would just be covered, it wouldn't interfere?
No.
No.
It's pretty common. It's pretty common to do athletic fields, put geothermal wells, fields under.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
So that's where we're at.
That's, I just thank you for the, I mean, for this alternate that was not on the table before. This is good. This is, I mean, it's definitely, that's the kind of thing that one hopes will come up when one allows a little more time and doesn't have to make some decisions.
Well,
to-
part of the key is this. You know, we thought about, could we add another line of parking here? But we're already flirting with the setback. And the setback, I don't know if you know it or not, but the right-of-way for Washington is 25 feet off of the sidewalk. And then you have another 50 feet setback. So we're really about 75, you know, you're approaching 75 feet, right? And in talking with the planning commission, they said, well, you know, Goodnor is not like that. Why is Washington just has a right-of-way, a very huge right-of-way on both sides? And I think at one time, the city may have thought that Washington was going to be another Cedar. And it didn't happen, but the right-of-way is established. I think,
There used to be a, what they call a dinky with a streetcar. The streetcar went all the way down Washington.
There used to be a streetcar on
So
that road.
theoretically, it was platted out that they would have right of way all the way up, and they didn't do it.
And to the west, Steve just pointed out to me, is, it's a divided
Yeah, that's where I was
parkway,
referencing, yeah.
So it's probably, they just
That's the old
continued
streetcar
that.
right
It was- Yeah, when they extended the streetcar from Coventry up to Lee Road, the one that was down to Washington's median, they stopped doing that.
Yeah.
my take on that is that I believe the planning commission would be amenable to a variance to do some things there, as long as we meet, there is a requirement in terms of how, you have to have some green islands or green space interspersed in your parking area. So that's why these little, you know, I think it's every 8 spaces or something, you have to have an island with some greenery or trees or some type of vegetation to break it up. And also, in terms of parking lot lighting, you know, when you start to get out here, you know, in terms of not having any light spilling over onto your neighbor's property, that we have to be sensitive to that. So, but one of the other things that this would do is it would give you in the evening when you had some type of event that was, let's say it's around 150, 200 people, the mini auditorium, or some other presentation, you know, everybody theoretically, if you had 150 people, they'd be able to park there close and get into the building. So it's just we haven't run this by the planning commission, we haven't kind of costed it out yet either, but it has some potential, I think.
It does, and you, part of what you asked was numbers of spaces, and that seems like that hits at the number for me, and I think you're hitting a number that's workable. And I'm not asking you to comment on this because it's way, but, oh, I wish you'd stop that. You actually, no, that's good, I don't know if talking over the notion of making Washington one way during parts of the day or whatever, it helped. What worries me when Eric was mentioning, you know, parallel parking on both sides of the street is traffic flow would just be awful. I think.
What I was saying was misunderstood.
Okay, no problem. So, but anyway, I just wonder if making it one way, if that would in any way help any of this parking. Because I still think the 27 spaces backing out while people are trying to move could be exciting as well, so I think.
One of the things that we have not discussed in detail with the city is who maintains these in terms of snow removal, and the other thing is who polices those, who makes sure whoever is parking there isn't just somebody who is just parking there. And I would think that these would be if this is faculty who is assigned here, it would be faculty that generally is there until after students are picked up. It just makes sense. I mean, why would you, to try and fight the flow? you know, and there are things you can work on with dismissal time in that too, in terms of, you know, where people are at, so. Anyway. That's great. Any other questions?
Any questions?
I like it.
Well, now all we have to do is wait for the fenestrations, right?
Do you know they call it fenestration, the fenestration show in this country, but once you go to Canada, it's the wind door show. I like Canada so much. It's really true.
Okay, as we agreed, we would have an opportunity for public comment at this point. And there's one little thing that I want to raise. We also said that we would be capturing these questions and issues that are raised by the public. And I'm not sure how we're handling them or managing them at this point. Can anybody enlighten me and the rest of the board maybe? You know, we talked about people making comments, and we talked about two things. We talked about capturing them, and we talked about making them available for the public to see. My question is, how is that going? Where are we, and who's responsible for it?
Well,
You want me to start?
go ahead.
We've been working with Angie in communications, and like from each of the meetings, we then provide her with the responses. She gets the questions listed, and then also we've been doing responses to those questions, and they're on the web page. And am I correct, Angie?
I take some of them, but you guys also take some.
Yes.
It's a team
Yeah,
effort.
team effort, yes, but we get them on the website.
So the list of questions that people, questions, issues, comments, or suggestions, I guess, that people give are on the website at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And I apologize because I haven't spent much time on the website.
And I think that's a good question, because there were some, at the beginning, it was taking, there was concerns it was taking too long to get those questions on the website.
Right.
And we've really picked up the pace in terms of doing that.
Okay. Well, thank you. So do we have anybody out there that, we do. Okay, I'm gonna apologize because I don't know everybody's name. The lady in the very back, in the purple, I think, is that purple? I think I saw your hand first. Is that, who is this, Anna? You need to come to the mic, the stand, and state your name and, you know, so forth. Pertinent information about yourself.
I'm Anna Kiss. I teach at the high school. I also moved into the community several years back because I really do love the area. I have a couple concerns. Parking is a concern for me, but what's more of a concern is the classroom space that has been allotted to a lot of our CTE programs. They are much, much smaller than what state recommends. A lot of our programs don't have the space we need. We've been told not to ask for more space because there isn't any space to give. Now, that poses a problem because if we're supposed to be, everything's for the students, how am I gonna teach my students if they don't have the space to work? I've had to be in a classroom where we were packed in like sardines, and it's not pleasant, especially when we have labs and equipment needs that require space. That being said, my question is this: when do we look at the plans and the structure that we have and say, all right, this is not gonna work. These classrooms, these teachers, these labs need this much space, and if we can't give them that space with the existing plan, when do we revisit it so that we can meet the needs of both the students and the future? Because if we're gonna be in this building for the next several decades, you know, there's no room to grow if I have a classroom that's supposed to accommodate 20 kids, but I can only get a dozen kids in there. So we just need something, some kind of resolution that meets the students' needs, that satisfies the state guidelines, that also fits into the plan that meets the district needs as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, Dr. Feldman's hand's in the air.
Did you call on me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Donna Feldman. I am a teacher also at the high school, and I'm here in sort of a semi-official capacity. I'm chief steward of the high school. A number of teachers raised two issues they asked me to address. First of all, I want to thank the board and the community for giving this incredible opportunity to our students to have a state-of-the-art high school. With it comes a great deal of happiness, but also some concerns, and I'd like to speak to those two concerns. The first concern is a shared classroom space, where teachers do not have their own classrooms, but are warehoused in a large room. There's some real logistic issues, I think, that will arise, and I'm basing this on what other teachers have said, as well as my own experience as a college instructor where I was traveling. I was and private school. I was a traveling teacher. First of all, there's loss of setup time, because right now, many of us are there before contract time, which we don't have to be, to set up and make sure everything is ready for our students. Well, when you can only come into a room right when the bell rings because it's occupied, you lose that time. And that time is something that you just can't get back. There's no set place when you share a classroom to meet with students. My students know where I am. They see me before school, after school, during my planning, during my lunch. Okay, that's my choice. My students know how to find me. When you share a classroom, that's compromised. We have these things called books that even as we move to paperless in the 21st century, not all of the materials we need are available online, especially for those of us who teach English. In a bullpen with other teachers, there's no privacy with which to make phone calls to parents, and especially as we want to do that more and more. One of the new tech teachers raised the issue that sharing space successfully does not happen overnight, and it's not for everyone. And it's just something that having people with their own classrooms and warehousing them is going to take a big adjustment and is going to need support if it's even possible to do that. But I think one thing that concerns me as a professional, this isn't germane to many other professions, and I worry when teachers are singled out for it. In the college model, where instructors and professors share space, they have their own offices to deal with meeting with students and also phone calls. And I think it's very interesting that we're meeting here in this building, which used to be Taylor Academy. None of us would even consider an open classroom construction. It was obsolete, 5 years after it was built? And what replaced it? The traditional classroom model. So I wonder if the PBL emphasis is sort of the flavor of the year for education. My doctorate, which is why I mentioned it, is in education, and there's a big pendulum swing. We had small schools. We had model schools. 20 years before that, model schools, small schools, schools within a school. So we have a pendulum swing. So just because it's here today doesn't necessarily mean it'll be here 5 years from today or 2 years from today when we're done with Wiley. Okay, second issue is the parking. There was great concern among Heights staff that we park in the parking structure across the street, the city structure. So one day when the weather was nice, I took a little walk there and I timed it. It took me 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I normally average about 3 miles a day walking on my own. So I walked at a faster speed. I had a bag, my purse. I did not have books. I did not have a computer. I didn't have a lunch or even a pair of shoes because of the inclement weather. I went out last Friday, and I would like to offer a couple pictures. Had I not stopped to take a picture, I would be in the hospital now, because a red SUV, more burgundy than red, ran a red light even though I, as a pedestrian, had the light to walk. That scared me. We are, in my family, we're very green. When we moved to Cleveland, we had more recycling than everyone else combined on our street. We have solar panels on our house, okay? Green space is very important to us. In other countries, and even in New York City, I've noticed that the roof could be used for green space or even solar panels. So those are my suggestions. The last thing I would like to offer is picture of Heights. In front of Heights, notice the lovely sidewalk that is clear. This was taken last Friday.
Dr. Feldman, we are at our time.
Okay. May I leave the pictures with you?
Could you maybe give them to Mr. Petkat? Or how would you want? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't say 5 minutes before, but 5 minutes is our limit, and I'll ding you at some point if you go over. Come forward. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but state it and let us know who you are.
Good evening. My name is Peter Adorjan. I'm a science teacher at Roxborough Middle School. Before I became a teacher, I was an environmental scientist, and before that I went to Heights High School and was in the environmental science club. Now I host it at Roxborough, and I have to say these children are very enthusiastic about recycling. Like, you would think it was Christmas time. They just go around every Friday and recycle every room, and they're enthusiastic about presenting ecological practices to the school. It's just great to be part of this club. I want to try to persuade you to choose green energy for the school, because I was thinking of how Roosevelt created the national park system. It was kind of against the grain, and today we're still enjoying it. So how can our community still enjoy it down the road? Is it just a regular building? That's great, but can we, like the geothermal, and like she stated about the rooftop, because I think in the future, we're gonna have to educate our students how to live in a world that has less resources, and I think it's best to teach them by example instead of saying, okay, do this environmental practice in a regular kind of school. I think it would be better if we show them that, hey, we already built a school like this, because this is the way the future is gonna be. And also, I saw on the website, I think last year, that 50% of education will be online in about 5 years. So how can we persuade parents to choose our school? I think this is a great way to persuade them to come to this school instead of staying home, where most people know that it's probably safer to stay home, but if you come to this school, you can learn how to do green practices, be self-sufficient. Like, we visited the Rittal and this is like the Green Ghetto, where they produce their own energy. So I just kind of urge you to look into that. There's some professional people that could assist you in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joan?
Joan Spurl, a parent of a fourth grader who you heard from recently. So I presented you all with a petition this evening, and I'm going to read the wording of it just for the public view. We had over 200 signatures. Ron got another sheet on top that you guys don't have copies of, but this is what it states. I believe that exemplary sustainable features should be priorities in the renovation of Cleveland Heights University Heights High School and subsequent renovations of other CHUH school buildings. I want energy use intensity, energy/square foot/year, small enough that the building has the potential to become net zero in the future, because the less energy a building consumes, the more money we save long-term, and the smaller the negative environmental impact/carbon footprint. 100% water recapture, retention, and reuse off the roof, if not from the whole site. Where I want outdoor space that is environmentally pleasing, provides a full array of ecosystem services to minimize stormwater runoff and maximize carbon sequestration, and allows for rich and varied learning opportunities. I want an exemplary approach to the design, construction, and renovation commensurate with our community's values of sustainability as promised by the school board. This will allow the district both to provide greater rigor and relevance to the future economy in its curriculum and to offer a valuable marketing point of pride for the school district and broader community. And for the people, before they signed the petition, we offered them all kinds of resources to look at. We had many people thanking us for putting it together. Kathy Len wrote a note to all of you. She is the, well, this is her note. As a resident of Cleveland Heights, I was happy to show my support for prioritizing sustainability features in the renovation of Cleveland Heights University Heights High School and the subsequent renovations of other CHUH school buildings. As the Sustainable Cleveland Coordinator for the City of Cleveland Mayor's Office, I also support sustainable measures that conserve our resources for the next generation. Please let me know if there is anything our office can do to assist in your efforts. I hope that you will join us as we build a thriving green city on a blue lake. Another community member wrote, "Hi, Joan. Thank you so much for doing this. I always support the school district levies, and I absolutely support the petition to make the new CHUH High School as environmentally sustainable as possible in terms of energy use, water recapture, and native landscape plantings. To do anything else would be unacceptable in terms of long-term financial and environmental costs. Cleveland Heights has been a national leader in so many areas in the past. This is the perfect way for the school district to show its leadership in the present." And from Susie Kaiser, "Joan, you have my permission to add my name to the petition to pursue strong, sustainable solutions in the renovation of Heights High. This is a fantastic opportunity to be part of the future." So, though there might be just a handful of us that show up at these meetings, there were people, when I gave them the petition, said, "Thank you so much. You know, I work 60 to 65 hours a week and I can't get to those meetings, so I thank you so much for doing it." But over 200 people signed, and we only had the petition out a little over a week, and we gathered those signatures. We represent a vast number of people in this community who believe in all of this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I see Brian has his hand up, I believe.
Thank you. My name is Brian Shaner. I'm a community member. I'm a teacher at Heights High, and I'm also an elected officer with the Teachers Union. And I guess it's as the latter that I'm speaking to you tonight. And I'm here to emphasize what Dr. Feldman talked about briefly and what you guys have spent a lot of time talking about, which is parking. And I just want to say to you that we all knew this was coming, the crunch between the dollars and the desires, and there's a balancing act to be done. And we all of us, I think, on the staff at Heights High are sympathetic with environmental goals, and we want to be as environmentally responsible as we can be. But speaking for the staff, I can tell you that we prefer to park on site, and that's pretty much the end of the story. So as their representative, I wanted to let you know in no uncertain terms, we could parade people in here and tell you all the reasons why, but you know what they are, that the on-site parking is by far preferable. And we appreciate that this is taking a lot of time, and we appreciate that you've looked at lots of possible solutions to the problem. And in my personal experience has been that you guys are really open to discussion and to compromise and to working things out. But the staff really prefers to park on site. And that's my message for you tonight. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I believe, Alan, you had your hand up?
Alan Wilkinson, community member, Sustainability Working Group. Joan said, and what I said last meeting, is your most affordable, most sustainable energy is the energy you don't use. And so that drives very much the geothermal option. I gave Ron a copy of the 50-year life cycle analysis. I don't know if you guys have gotten that in general, but that at 50 years, which is the LFC plan horizon was 50 years, you get a $14.7 million savings over boiler chiller and $9.8 million savings over the hybrid system. And that includes, paying for the upfront costs as a part of that total life cycle cost. So I think you want to look at that. The 35-year thing doesn't capture the actual need for 2 boiler replacements, and 50 years captures a 2 boiler replacement scenario, which shifts things notably. The other thing is, to my knowledge, and there really hasn't been much new information about the design, but we're still at the EUI values of 38.3, 63.7, and 81,000 BTUs per square foot. If you're going to save, one way to shrink the well field is to have a tighter envelope, lose less heat out the walls and windows. So, there are other solutions that we really need to keep talking about. And I leave it at that. I guess I had a more discouraged message written up because I thought you're going to make a decision tonight, and I would be discouraged with the decision. So at this point, I need to.
How would you know what the decision would be?
I'll say that.
Help me out here.
We'll disappoint you sometime.
Well, I am, no.
Fielding is a teaching tool. Remember I offered that thing about the students writing the software? That seems to have died somewhere.
No, nothing's dead. Everything's still on the table. We're in the design development stage, nothing's dead.
There's
Well,
2.5
what I heard
years.
tonight was that all 3 options will be still considered, and that's good.
Nothing's dead, that's correct. Just a comment from me. We keep comparing the life cycle cost versus the construction costs. Those are 2 different kinds of costs and come from 2 different pots of money. So I just want to we need to begin to be clear that we're not apples and oranges when we try to compare the operating costs over 50 years versus the upfront costs. They're not the same costs. They don't come from the same place. I mean, we'll have more discussion on this, but we need to disengage our thinking around those being similar costs, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys got to say about it.
Well, I mean, I see some reaction from the audience, Ron, but I think most of the people in the audience understand that the issue is we have a finite number of dollars that we can spend from the bond issue that was passed. And we cannot take into consideration the overall energy usage and our operating costs over a 50-year period when we make decisions related to the spending for the facilities plan. We can take that into consideration as voters, as homeowners, as taxpayers, and as stewards of our environment, which are all really important things to consider. But those issues are not part of our decision-making for how we spend the bond dollars. We are pushing, and I think those of you who were in the audience last time heard us push hard back to the team to say, some of us, and others didn't say anything. I'm not saying anyone disagreed, but some said we really want to push this issue of full geothermal because we think it's the right thing to do. But that we can't take into consideration whether it be necessarily a 35 or a 50-year life cycle cost, because those are operational dollars that are funded out of a completely different pot of dollars. That's what you're referring to.
Right. Gary, did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say that.
I got you.
I understand what you're saying, that there is a budget for construction. And when we have the numbers, you will only have X amount of dollars to spend for the construction. And so you will have to weigh, you'll have different options that you'll have to weigh. What is more important? And that comes back to your constituents in the community in terms of, is it this or is it this?
Yeah, and I guess as we post this question, I think we should explain a little bit about that as well. Okay. I'm sorry, Don, I apologize.
See, I'll do this as start off as board policy says I should. My name's Don Frederick. I live at 3585 Cummings Road, Cleveland Heights, Ohio.
That's right.
Parking. I think that we need to have all parking on site and ample parking on site. I just can't imagine 300 200 to 300 staff crossing Cedar Road back and forth during the 2 rush hours. Maybe that's not the exact right number, but I'm telling you, Cedar Road is a major artery into the downtown. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I think it would be dangerous and just wouldn't work. And the parking is needed for sporting events, theater events. We've talked all about opening up the high school for the community. Well, the community's gonna have to walk across the street now. And that street is dangerous, as Dr. Feldman mentioned. Also, the cost of the parking lot, $440,000. I'm not a finance major either, but I thought when I was working on a bond levy and for the design of a high school that a parking lot would be part of the cost included in. I didn't think there would be no parking. That would be extra. And so that is important to me. The sizing of the CTE rooms is still an issue. I know there were a number of promises made to the community. Everybody's on promises made to the community. The architectural preservation, access to the building, all CTE sites at the high school. And as the budget condenses, some of these things have to go. I think the first things that should go are like the cosmetics, the building fronts. I think we need more room for education. Let's make more room for education. I know it's a nice view. I look at the science wing has been up there now for 55 years. Nobody's been clamoring to see the front of the high school. And not only that, the high school wing, the science wing went up, starting in like I believe it was 59, opened in 61. 62. People had to decide to raise the money to build that, to put it in that place. So apparently that was okay to them at that point in time. It being a science wing, my speculation, it was probably due to very important events in the then developing Cold War around the launch of Sputnik, and there was a big push forward for science and math in the high schools. That overrode the need for having a view on the high school. So I would, be careful with that. The other point I want to make is with the CTE spaces, the thing was all spaces at the high school. All the CTE programs will not fit adequately at the high school. 3 of them are located in this building right now. I would like to see the district move away from the promise that all CTE courses be located at the high school. One example I have is that Auto Tech is going to move into this building. It's going to be a fine facility. It looks like it's probably going to be better than what Auto Tech will move back to at the high school, size-wise and classroom sharing-wise. So that's important. And I saw at Mayfield High School Monday, the clinical health careers class, which according to the Ohio Design Manual, Ohio School Design Manual, is supposed to be a 1,400-foot lab and a 900-foot classroom, okay? They had it all in one room, the lab and the classroom, but we paced it off, and it was 2,500 square feet, which is close to what the Ohio School Design Manual recommends. Please consider not having all of those programs at the high school if they're going to be undersized, if there's no room for expansion. Utilize some of the spaces you have, take the program seriously, give them a brand and an identity. It is a big element of the future workforce. A lot of other districts around us have figured it out. They're working on it hard. We are way behind. It's time to pick up the slack there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Larry Solish. I'm a resident of Cleveland Heights, a former student, a father of a graduate, and a father of a senior at the high school now. And I'm also the president of the Softball Boosters Club, who was responsible for building the field. We are very encouraged by this plan that was presented tonight. because we've heard things of the softball field being eliminated for parking. So we like this plan. I understand the need to have parking on site. It would be wonderful, but I think the last resort should be to eliminate not only green space, but 2 ball fields to put up a parking lot. When there's one 4 minutes across the street, as Dr. Feldman mentioned. I also think if the softball field was a parking lot, the walk from home plate to the building would probably be farther from the walk from across Cedar. So to address the Cedar, we allow our students to park across Cedar. Students have been parking there for 75 years. Nobody seemed to have a problem with students crossing Cedar Road every day, but now we have a concern about teachers crossing Cedar Road. I think the city and the board can work a reasonable plan to come up with a new traffic plan, a new traffic pattern with new red lights, with security to assure that it's a safe crossing of Cedar Road. But I think this plan looks like the best for all concerned. It solves the parking problem. It leaves the 2 ball fields. I think the only issue you have is some screening to protect some cars when Jennifer's daughter hits home runs next year. So we like that, but I think the last resort should be to tear down 2 fields that were built with boosters money and put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments, observations from any board members? Okay, in that case, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Koldel.
Yes.
Ms. Pepler.
Yes.
Mr. Register.
Yes.
Mr. Silverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker.
Yes.